Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance.astrology, and welcome to Meet the Planets series. Today we're going to talk about Uranus, and we're going into the realm of the outer planets, which is very different than the seven inner planets. And I'm so excited doing this today. We are recording this on Monday, February 16th of 2026 at around 5 p.m. Central European time. And this is just before the eclipse is happening, which is very much closely, I mean, it's squaring Uranus. So Uranus is very much present in the sky right now. And we hope that this will also infuse this episode for you to really understand what Uranus is all about. And today I'm joined by Liv, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we're slowly going to dive into Uranus. That sounded weird saying it like that, but
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. So my name is Liv. Um, I I feel as though I do have the credentials, and I appreciate being on here. I feel as though I am pretty chaotic. I have a I have a stellium in Aquarius in my 10th house as a Scorpio rising, and it's Uranus, my midheaven. I also have Jupiter, and they all square my Sun, Mercury, and Chiron in Scorpio. Um, it's been a life, I guess you could say. It's definitely a life that's always constantly changing. And most importantly, I'm still grateful for it. It definitely has taught me a lot. It's shown me a lot. And I've been doing astrology now over 5.5 years. I started before COVID and 5.5, 6 years. So, yeah, thank you.
yeah, and Liv is also known as combustastrology,
Mhm.
which you can find on Instagram and on TikTok, right?
Hmm. I
And
think I'm on all platforms.
okay, all platforms. They're going to be linked down below, so you can easily find him. Yes, is there anything else you want to say? Right, so you have Uranus pretty much
Oh,
conduct the
yeah. I mean, I
MC.
can
That's
talk.
very loud.
Yeah, I have Uranus squaring my sun, and it also opposes my IC in the fourth house, which we could talk about that and how that shaped my childhood and or what it is that I felt that I'm different outside of my family. I don't want to say black sheep, that just seems cringy, but there are definitely things that I just did not agree with my culture growing up, and a lot of things that I'd be like, why are things this way? Um, with my Haitian heritage, I'm just like, why do we do this? Why do we look at things this way? Why do we treat um, the men versus the women in our culture differently in terms of these things? So I would always look at that. But being a Uranus, an honorary Uranian person, and having the square to my sun, the friction that that square has given me has also made me overcome just about anything that's put in front of me. And we were talking about Saturn and Aries before this, and I feel like my Saturn is like, all right, you've been an adult before the age of 20 for several years now. I think it's time that you can kind of relax and, you know, grieve and lick your wounds to realize that you don't have to be such a super soldier. So, but that Uranus definitely gave the super soldier obstacles and the walls I had to climb over and, or, trudging through the mud a lot. But I still enjoy it because problems always give you growth. No matter what it is, you can get better at something, or you can realize that other people probably came to the same conclusion, and whatever path they took can help you with your own. But you're never alone with whatever it is. That's the coolest thing about Uranus. You're not the only person. It's finding the right people that really helps, and that's the network of Aquarius. So,
Yes, I fully agree. And I think that's actually the kind of like the perfect segue into what we usually talk on here when we talk about the planet, which is like dignities and everything. I will say though, the outer planets work a bit differently from the seven inner planets. It's like usually very clear. With the outer planets, we get into a territory which is a lot of people have different opinions on
mm-hmm.
things. Is like is the rulership there? Is it not there? Like we both come from like a more traditional work of astrology, even though I will say, and maybe it's the same for you, like when I got into astrology, it was modern psychological astrology, where
Mm-hmm.
Uranus definitely was the ruler of Aquarius, and then later on getting in touch with the fact that it's Saturn, it really shifted my perspective as well. But I do think it's interesting talking about that because again, it's still so present in the astrology and the association with Uranus and Aquarius. There is obviously a lot that kind of goes hand in hand, and there's obviously a reason why people started to associate Uranus with Aquarius or Aquarius with Uranus. And that's like kind of, we're going to run into that with all the outer planets. So we're kind of going to talk about the dignities here, but also keep in mind that both of us practice more traditional astrology. So personally, I don't associate Uranus with Aquarius. I can see the traits, but for me, it's going to be Saturn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I my my sh- my shtick on the dignities, especially, I feel as though I'm shaped the same way, psychological astrology, and I feel like the forefront of that shaping is Liz Green, and because of
Oh, yeah.
that, I piggybacked off of the way she's looked at stuff, and then I've just created my own look at it, and I feel as though the dignities of the outer planets are psychologically something that you can grasp, maybe like a tangible thing. So that way people aren't confused about like, oh, I got Neptune squaring my moon. Does that mean I'm crazy? No. It means that you're intermittently psychic, right? It's something as simple as Pluto trining my Venus. I will never have power. Or I have to play these power games. No. Maybe it's just the fact that power surrounds you. And so the exaltation of Uranus in this in this pure way, I said it was Scorpio. And the biggest reason that I've looked at it to be Scorpio is that you're going all in, right? The key trait of Scorpio is to be like, I'm obsessed. And as a Scorpio, I will say the obsession isn't just because you're Scorpio. That's the effect of Pluto. But it's like, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die doing this thing, right? I'm like my wife and I, like, we've had this conversation of like, would you ever get into this situation? And I, like, my thing is the extreme. I'm like, do I have to die? Is my safety actually at
Yeah.
risk? Because it's like I will fight for what I feel as though this is the last moment, right? And that's a very Scorpio thing. It's like precision versus Aries is like a machine gun, like that sniper bullet of Scorpio. In Uranus, I feel best explains what Uranus wants to be, and it's someone that is pre social media. They're pre the validation of Leo. They're pre the need to have constant presence of Taurus. And they're also above the need to seem so different of Uranus. And in that small shading, Scorpio best fits where Uranus wants to be because it gets to completely focus on something that it doesn't have to justify itself to other people. You know, finding people that are like, I call it like widowed, that have like moon or Venus in Scorpio, like they have a love really early in their life and then it doesn't pan out because you're younger than 25, duh. And it's like you find out that what you thought love is, your Venus and Mars aren't even mature yet and you just realize, wait, this isn't what I thought it was. And then you learn crucial lessons, but the Venus and the moon in Scorpio can't handle letting go. But the Uranus will force you constantly to let go because things have to change. And I have found that people that actually have Uranus and Scorpio, like, they are the witches of their generation. They are like so incredibly gifted. And this exaltation for them, like, they walk that life. It almost feels like medieval,
Hmm.
like you're a witch and around you people don't understand. And it's better than Aquarius to me because Aquarius is trying to look for acceptance, but the jaded side of Scorpio is like, I don't give a damn. Who cares? I don't care about whether or not people do see me for what I'm saying. I know my truth, and that is the best place for me where I think Scorpio would be. We can talk about the fall in Taurus, the opposition, but that's really why I think Scorpio looks at its best in its exaltation.
Yeah, I certainly, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. We talked also briefly a bit about this before. Both Scorpio and Aquarius have this. They're both kind of the odd ones out. It's like take out the weirdos of the zodiac sign, and it's like Scorpio and Aquarius. They kind of fit into that scheme, and it's almost like a mutual love when they kind of find each other, even though technically by sign they have a square relationship. But I do think they both have that part, even though, as you mentioned before, right? I do think Aquarius, even though they won't admit it, but deeply they care a bit more about what other people and especially the collective think about them than they would want to admit. And I think it's often also that Uranian urge to be different and eccentric, and it's almost the trap of that where Aquarius often falls, where it's like, oh, but see me in my differentness, like see me how unique and, and different I am, so I fully get that part. And Scorpio, yeah, I think it takes that. I feel like Scorpio can be a lone wolf better, even though I certainly don't think like Scorpios are meant to be lone wolves. Scorpio definitely has that Venusian ruled 12th house in Libra going on, where it's they're scared to admit oftentimes that they do actually want someone and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But the Uranian dignity, I definitely think you can see there, like the way that you explained, and obviously then looking at Taurus, which would be the opposite sign, where in the modern dignity scheme, Uranus would then be in its fall. I mean, it's what we were experiencing now this past 7 years. Even right now, Uranus is currently still in the sign of Taurus, even though we're
Mm-hmm.
slowly in the process of saying goodbye and separating from that. And that has just been hard. I mean, it fixed sign. And Taurus is, I think, of all the fixed signs, like maybe the most fixed sign with the earth element. And it just kind of doesn't go hand in hand, or at least it feels extremely uncomfortable in the realm of Taurus. And maybe you can say some more things on that.
Yeah, I feel as though Uranus and Taurus is horrible. I actually, I actually hate it. But it's necessary, And I have a lot of fixed in terms of like my axis, so I know why I hate it, but it doesn't make it any less of a hate. And if we go back to that exaltation of fall, the opposite of Scorpio is Taurus, and I think that's what the transiting Taurus is trying to get rid of. So Taurus is Venus and it wants to be stable. And in your own podcast, when you covered Venus, that stability, that Venusian slowness that Taurus gives you is so happy. It's so peaceful. You wake up, you do what you got to do, you eat some nice meals in between, you sit back. The idea of leisure, the idea that nothing has to change. And it is a stabilizing period in history to go through that. But in Uranus, it is the worst thing. I feel like in Uranus, it produces such levels of greed that it's just horrible because nothing wants to stay the same forever. We think we do, but so many movies illustrate that point. You could be stuck with your lover. There's a Black Mirror episode about it actually. Being stuck in time with someone that you love. I feel like 100 years is enough before you get pissed off, right? And it doesn't matter how much you love the person because as much as we claim that we want that stability, we love what changes. It's just the speed of it. And Uranus and Taurus, if you were to have a natal placement, let's say we're just a bunch of robots in the future and someone actually has it, they don't want things to leave Venus. They don't want to feel that change. So it has to be the fall because stability long term is always the fall of the biggest empires. It's not that the stability here in definition is I'm happy, but it's just the idea that nothing progresses. And over time, time will cause more people to be alive, more things. And I'm not saying kill people, I'm not Thanos, but it's so much of like, you can't have this golden forever unless you're willing to look at how you make it better. And making it better means it cannot be the same, and you have to let go of what is no longer needed. So of course, now natally seeing why it's just the antithesis of everything. I like to look at it for people who have Leo risings have gone through the gutter. With Uranus in their 10th house, they've gone through the gutter because you were never supposed to be in the same thing. Fixed sign people have gone through it with Uranus, but you were never supposed to go through the same thing because the monarchy can't last forever. And the transit of this has been horrible, but it's been amazing at the same time. We have seen in society something so simple as like the way that we look at food, the nutrients that
Yeah.
we get, and what it is we actually need has been challenged through whether it's like GMOs, the farmers, and the way that they see that seeds are being kind of like tokenized by large institutions. And it's not like a political conversation, but it's very much like, hey, how do we treat things long term?
Yeah.
How do we have actual sustainability? Because what we do now doesn't work. And whether you're pro or against that, it's still a conversation that Uranus in Taurus, the transit, will bring. And then there's other things like just the way that we look at working, it's
Mm.
not the same. And it moves because what comes next is Gemini. And I look at that and I'm like, that's another tokenization where your everyday labor is not enough to retire on. Like you have to do so much more. You have to have little side hustles or side jobs, and you can't just rely on that stability. And so Uranus and Taurus, Uranus shaking things up and Taurus wanting things to stay the same, you put it together and you bring about massive instability in our world. And then on like the financial landscape, having the cryptocurrencies having monumental runs, but also lesser things during that time in the early, I can't believe I'm saying 2020s. God. um, Seeing things like NFTs go
Yeah.
crazy, seeing things like bubbles, like in the financial markets, like REITs and it's almost seeming like scams, but when I look at it in the bigger, broader view, everything that's tried to run is just trying to replace the current system of what
Mm.
we have, is what we see as monetary. Really, what we find value, because Venus, second house,
Yeah.
it's our own values. So the world, in its sense, is trying to define what is the value. We're going to go to gold. Are we going to go into bricks and support different, I'm just going to say large players? Or do we stay with the dollar? Like, what do we do, right? And cryptocurrencies tried to make their run for it to transfer over. And more recently, silver and gold had such an
Yeah.
crazy movement from inflation, but it's really just trying to figure out what's next. What do we do? And I think that as we go into Gemini, not the exaltation or the fall, it still brings up a point because the trine to Pluto, the trine of the people that have the natal placements, as we talked about, it's huge, you know?
Agreed. I'm really curious if things are gonna shift in the financial markets now with this eclipse that is squaring Uranus and what's gonna happen with everything that has been kind of piling up over the past few months. And I think we can kind of, I mean, not the financial market now, but like the antithesis of Aquarius, which Uranus would be said is in domicile, would be Leo, and Leo is ruled by the sun. It's a very steady light. It's the most fixed light we have. Like all the planets are moving around the sun, so of course Uranus would then have its detriment in Leo, and that's exactly the same principle why it would struggle because it is kind of holding on to that thing that is like forever, and even like of course the sun has been shining so long now and it feels like it's going to do that forever, but it won't. Realistically it won't at some point. And so I do think Uranus just is that principle of like rupturing things, which again in fixed signs it's just extremely uncomfortable because none of them kind of like that. They're fixed signs. And I
Yeah.
do think in obviously in Gemini, even though there is no dignity associated with Uranus, I think works a lot better because Mercury has that dual nature that, in my opinion, at least, is much more similar to the Uranian energy. I mean, combine Mercury, Uranus together, transit wise, they kind of like tend to amplify each other.
Mhm.
So I think Uranus and Gemini is going to be very, very different energy. Like even faster, even accelerating way more. It's already started bringing things in globally, right? We have the whole conversation around AI and all of that. And the godfather of AI, I forgot his name right now, but
Mhm.
he has a natal Uranus and Gemini, and I'm like, of course he has. And so I do think it's going to accelerate even more. And at the same time, and this is not, I mean, this episode is about Uranus, but it's like
Mhm.
in a forecast type of way, the fact that the outers are all going to trine or sextile each other, I think a lot of what we are maybe afraid of right now is like the solutions are only just going to appear because Uranus in Gemini is going to start asking the right questions, which have like not even made space right now. You know, it's like Gemini is the principle of asking the question and opening that portal uh, that unlocks the door. And so Uranus and Gemini is going to be a lot about that and what it means to what does it mean to know something or what does it mean to qualify having knowledge to study to go to school, how are we learning in the first place? So it's a different type of quality. And obviously there's a bit of Aquarius there as well. They're both air signs and that's like how they come together. So I am, yeah, excited and terrified. I've been saying this for a while about the whole future transits that are happening. Obviously, I know there's a lot of talk in the US more with Uranus and Gemini and the Civil War and
Mhm.
everything, which we don't necessarily have to deeply get into it, unless you want to maybe say a bit more. I feel like I'm not from the US, so I don't want to like you know,
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it in that way, but it's certainly literally up in the air.
Mhm. Mhm. It definitely is, and it all ties together that change has to happen, I think. Like
Hmm.
when you spoke about Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI,
Mm,
um when the person that is seen as the creator of it, or really the one that like pioneered it, is coming out and saying, "Wait, you guys don't know what what you're dealing with." Like, I still don't think AI is at the point of it being scary. I think it's the holders of AI and the massive amounts of
mm,
information that they're siphoning from it that is really the scary point. Because Jeffrey, with what he said, it's like Frankenstein. You know, the
yeah,
creator of Frankenstein's
yeah.
like, wait, like, hey, you guys don't realize this doesn't have a soul. It's walking around and it doesn't see you, even though it looks like it sees you. It doesn't.
Hmm.
It looks like it's human. It's not. And that goes into what I think overlays a big issue over here, where what we're thinking we're seeing in terms of America is not what exactly is. And even I sometimes, I've been living here for all of my life, but sometimes the way that it can make you feel here is that you're not, how do I say this? Very particularly. My cultural background is Haitian, but at times I still forget that I'm also American because of what it
Mm,
can feel like. But if you talk to a person about America, they're going to bring the parts of America that in the natal chart is Cancer in the eighth house. It's like you get
yeah.
opportunity, you know, the Libra 11th house, the Neptune and Virgo, I think it was, and it's these opportunistic things, but it ignores the foundations of the seventh house in Gemini, the third house in Aquarius, and it's like the identity is us all, and that's something that I think Uranus and Gemini coming in is going to be like, who are we really? And hopefully it's not something that leads in, you know, the shedding of people's lives, but I think it's something that's going to require a giant structural shift that I don't know if America's ready for because I agree with what you're saying that basically it feels like time's speeding up. And I don't know if it started in 2013. I want to assume like Saturn had something to do with that in Pisces, but it's felt like time is speeding up. Or maybe what you do is not enough to um, catch up with this world and what's going on. That could be a really good overlay to it. Like outside of that doom and gloom, I'm still optimistic about Uranus and Gemini, believe it or not, because in my years of living, I'm tired. I'm tired of what we got right now. I'm just like, it's so outdated. No one wants to see
Agreed.
the other side. We don't want to progress. We want things to be the same way. And being in the West, quote unquote, it's just like, I think that the people that got what is a la creme de la creme period of time are gripping so hard to keep it together, but
Mm,
they're not realizing that nothing is forever in just complex systems. Like you can't keep that perfectness forever. Rent is always going to keep going up. These things are keep, and you can say it's greed. Let's say it's Uranus and Leo or Pluto and Leo, but I think that no matter what, the power dynamics, if it's held at the top, will corrupt. But in Gemini, it could spread it around. It could be like, hey, it doesn't just have to be this. And maybe it's like a true democracy, or maybe it's a true growth, because it will provide the answers. It's just, do people want to hear these answers? I don't know if they do. I don't know if they really do, because the answer might not be the direct favoring of your party or your band or your people or whatever. It can be something that you're like, wait, I actually don't want that. That's not
mm,
something that makes me the best winner. Um, this idea that we're all on a bus, or that movie about the train and the different carriages of where people live their lives, but we're all on the bus, and most people say that they want everyone to have equal seating, but they do things in life to just get them closer to the front of the bus, right?
mm.
And it's just simply to be in a better position to see the view. I don't remember what that movie was, but it was a movie
Was
about
it
like
was it
people.
Snowpiercer?
Yeah, Snowpiercer. They were in the
Yeah.
back of the train and they tried to get through. And it's like going through all
Yeah.
that is what I feel like going through different classes of everything. I'm not against people having success or striving for stuff, but our system is too integrated that you can't bubble yourself. And Uranus and Taurus, that's what it did. It was like, you're not in a bubble. You think you are, but this is more complex than you realize. You affect this and this, and in turn you get affected by this and this, and it popped the bubble. It definitely popped it. And we're living in that aftermath of that pop. We just don't realize it.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of like in the early, yeah, 2020s, right? It feels crazy saying that, but
Mm-hmm.
when Saturn and Jupiter were squaring Uranus in Taurus, I think that is when a lot of shift happened. And I hear most people say that it's like post-COVID era is when every like nothing felt the same ever since then. And I agree, honestly. It's something started to feel very off. And it's true, that was kind of the beginning of, and it's like not specifically just Uranus talking here, right? It's also like the conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and now we're getting Neptune, Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries. There's just a lot of things that are happening and that we kind of need to be ready. I think, again, Uranus as an archetype of revolutions, of revolutionaries, and it can go both ways. And I also like what you actually mentioned in the beginning. I think Uranus also carries that, and I think it kind of goes to the Promethean myth, which we can maybe expand on after that, is the fact that it always looks way scarier than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the Promethean myth like has to do with fire, and that was also something that in the beginning was revolutionary, like having fire, like being able to create fire. But then at the same time, it could warm people. It could bring, I mean, not shelter in that way, but just like warm your shelter. People
Mm-hmm.
weren't freezing to death anymore. People could cook food all of a sudden. At the same
Mm-hmm.
time, it also had a destructive quality of used in the wrong hands. Whole villages could be burned down. And I think that's the same with, and I don't want to make this conversation about AI specifically, but just as an example, I feel like that's what we are with AI right now, where people
Mm-hmm.
are just a lot of projection, I think, putting on
Yeah.
AI and all of that, and what it is and what it isn't. I think the real question isn't, is AI bad? I don't think inherently it is, like any invention. It's who uses it and for what, right? I think that's always kind of the question or the answer to things, and it depends on that, like who's creating that AI, what information is it being fed and which people are using it for what purposes. So and that is Uranus as well. And I feel like that's also that like wild card energy that Uranus often
Mhm.
brings, where it's like, okay, I'm here, I'm the new invention. And like, what are you going to do with it now? Are you going to use it for good? Are you going to use it for bad? So, yeah, should we expand on the like whole myth a bit here, or do you feel like going in a different direction with this? Or
No,
like the,
I'd love to talk about the
okay,
myth
cool.
because it would also bring something where Prometheus has a brother, right? Or
Yeah.
this idea of what is after that with his Epimetheus. I hope I'm saying it correctly. And it's kind of like foolishness when I look at it. Um, when I look at the Promethean, like the two of them, it's like the Hangman or the Full card, upright or reverse, and it's how you look at it. And right now, I still think we're just getting the fire. We don't even know that it's fire yet. Like the way that through using science, you could really do a lot with fire. But when you first light a match, you're just like, oh, I can use this to feed myself, right? And I think that's a bigger human problem than anything else. And if we just look at the myth of Uranus, it would go back to um, humans, and this isn't gender related, but humans having a desire to constantly create something new or give birth to something new and to
Hmm.
take from the feminine, or what I would say is like creativity, unlimited, and just decide that they have to impede their will and this is what things have to be, right? And the Promethean fire then becomes this issue of, if we use AI as an example, where's the ethics, right? Where is, once you take this thing that's really powerful and we can do so much with it, how do we do it? As of late, recently, there have been a lot of, I'm going to say, solutions to medical problems that we've had for quite a bit of time. Now, some part of it's like politically related, but there have been cures for cancers. There have been cures for a lot coming out in the past few months in like the European area. And I look at that as a much better way of using that fire than anything else that we can think about right now, because people are so caught up, and I blame Uranus and Taurus as well as the next big thing. Because Venus likes pleasure, one side effect of Uranus and Taurus I've noticed is like people flock so quickly to
Mm.
what they think is going to give them stability forever. And that satisfaction, that desire, that's the shadow of this transit. That's basically like Uranus and Scorpio, where it's like, I got to be first. It's like a Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
And you'll see these like pump and dump or like these boom bust cycles and things where it's like when Labubus were going crazy, right? It's like, why? But it's this thing that seems like it's related to status, or if you have this and you're stable, and it's just like, it doesn't have to be defined, but it goes back to where, if I start an LLM, or if I use an LLM and I start a business, I never have to work again in my life. And it's like, but you're contributing to something that will eventually outdate you. Like, you're
Mhm.
going to be obsolete, and people don't look at that other side of the Prometheus, the Epimetheus, where you feel like a fool. You're like, you just wasted what you had, and you don't really want to accept that. And I look at this and I'm like, wow, AI is a great example, but it's everywhere. It really is. Humans day to day are now going to collectively have to think about each other, and that's something that I think that the Gemini transit will do the best, because it's about your twins. It's Gemini
Yeah.
is about the journey every step of the way in front of you. Well, Sagittarius is the whole thing, but Gemini switching left and right, doing what it has to do, going from masculine to feminine through whatever message it's trying to reach, is going to make it so we're not going to be able to cross that bridge without each other, right? You
Yeah.
can't cross it on your own. Conversations like what we're having has to be had so everyone can put in their 2 cents of the whole pie, and or the whole sense of the whole dollar, and we can buy ourselves all a slice of pie before whatever else happens next. But yeah, it's just not going to be a me versus you thing. It has to be a collective. and it's a collective that's global. But humans and globalism, that's another conversation. So, yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's also just the realization that, revolutions, it seems fun on paper, but the reality of it, like actually being in it, and it's not that I can like sit here and be like, oh, I have experience with being in a revolution. I don't know. I don't know what it feels like. But I think that's what a lot of people are grappling with, and it's not easy. It never is. Like if there's newness, of course people are always gonna be fixated on the past or how things were or how much, again, more stable everything felt. And it
Mhm.
requires a lot of us. It requires to be out there to yeah, head into the future. And I do think, I mean, Uranus has this really interesting function, and maybe we can talk here a bit about just like the Uranus glyph and also how Uranus was discovered, because that in and of itself says us already so much about Uranus. But basically, the fact that Uranus is like the first planet after the seven inner planets, and
Mhm.
astrology in and of itself for the longest time has been based around the seven inner planets. And all of a sudden, there is a discovery of Uranus, changing the whole system of astrology from the ground up. Like that gives us a glimpse into Uranian energy. It is here to shift things, to stabilize them from the ground up and revolutionize your life. Now, is it comfortable? Heck no. I wasn't alive when Uranus was discovered, but I'm assuming a lot of astrologers were maybe quite frankly even pissed because it feels like your
Yeah.
worldview or how you've been working is like completely shifting all of a sudden. And then you question, what is even reality? It was everything just my projection.
Yeah.
Did I make this up in my mind? And so that nature of Uranus, that like unpredictability, that unexpectedness that it brings, like we can see it in the discovery and the fact that the person that discovered it, what was the name? Yeah, William Hersch. He was searching for a comet. He wasn't even searching for Uranus. So the discovery in and of itself was unexpected. And we were like looking at the dates. It was roughly around 1781 that Uranus was discovered, just to kind of give you a time frame. Yeah, changing astrology forever and many systems.
Yeah. I think about that and I'm just like the coolest thing that we get is we're going to go through Uranus and Gemini. When Uranus was discovered, Uranus was in Gemini and
Yeah.
it was Jupiter and in Scorpio as a rising allegedly. But all that energy to me is like just take the leap. And a way that Uranian energy is really best used is there's always more that you don't know.
Mm,
And one example could be like isotopes of elements that like they might be more suitable for a specific use case. And through right now Uranus in Gemini will show us what the let's just say the new moon of Uranus having been in Sag was trying to get us to, which is a leap of time. So I've been looking at the two of them, Uranus and Sag and Uranus and Gemini. It takes quite a bit of time for them to happen, but every time we get seeds from Gemini that feed into Sag that then furthers some sort of like trek or something that needs to be learned, and that then seeds back into Gemini, which the last time Uranus was in Sagittarius, it basically revolutionized astrology and all these spiritual practices that allows us to actually be interested in any of this shit, to talk about it. And I've always, because of this, when I first came into astrology, I made fun of it and I was like, I don't see how this is scientifically provable, or I can't replicate it, only to realize that that's the Pandora's box of this
mm,
whole world. Like the darkness, creativity, the feminine, you don't have the ability to science it out or know the exact answers. And that is what Uranus and Gemini, which is Gemini is the inconjunctive Scorpio. I look at that and I'm like, wanting to dive deep and also being okay to have different questions. And if you want to think about it in a different way, TikTok is a great example. Besides the political stuff attributed to it, I can
yeah.
open that app and without fail, I'm going to learn something. Whether or not it's something I actually need to know,
Yeah.
I have opened that app and learned about things. And I was just like, the other day I was scrolling on it and someone was teaching how to identify a sound of suspension parts in your car. And they showed you the tool, the equipment, and how to use it. And I'm like, what this does is not just the person teaching you something very niche in their skill, amazing, fabulous, but it's the fact that someone could now use what they would have never known easily or without a lot of time, which is what Gemini is
Yeah.
going to do. It's going to save you time. And they could probably apply that to something else that could help us all so much more that no one thought of, but that person wouldn't have access without that application. Now, besides the politics of the app itself, that's the type of thing I feel like we get. And when Herschel, looking for a comet, accidentally discovered Gemini, what a better, like, that has to be the best way. I can't think of a better way to really show that. He wasn't even looking for that. And now look at how it's affected us. And for the same reason, if we find like another planet in astrology, or we find something else, we'll find that that's really the underlying thing. But the new knowledge doesn't dismiss the past. It doesn't render everything prior to that useless. It's like we just keep building. And that's the
Mm.
change, right? You just got to keep building on top of whatever. And that's the mutability of Gemini here, where it's like, okay, one plus one is two. What about one times two? How does that change that relationship between the two of them, ironically?
Yeah, yeah. And it's also there was a bit of a dichotomy when Uranus was discovered. I mean, now we're like, yes, Uranus is Uranus, but there was a thing of first naming Uranus after the discoverer and like naming Uranus Herschel. And I think for a brief moment they even named it Herschel, but then
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of like myth and things that came into play. And I'm wondering if Herschel would have went through what people would have done with the other outer planets.
Yeah.
It's so hard to imagine now because we know it like that, but I really wonder how it felt at that time when this discovery happened and really fundamentally yeah, just changed everything, how we looked at it, and not just in astrology, but also in astronomy, which again, they're interlinked. They're
Mm-hmm.
basically inseparable, even if we act nowadays that they are
Mm-hmm.
completely separate. But I do think, and even Uranus, as a planet in and of itself, if we look at the planet, it's the only planet that is moving like in
Yeah.
a different direction, which I don't have the English words for it right now, like rotating
Yeah,
in a
like orbiting and its axis is tilted or something like that.
exactly. So even there we can see that Uranus is just like, I'm gonna do things in a different way than the other
Yeah.
planets. I'm gonna be the odd
Yeah.
one out, even in the system.
Yeah.
And the fact that Uranus like also has a ring similar to Saturn, and yet both of them are so different.
Mm.
But the fact that, well, let's just talk about Saturn for a bit because for the longest time, Saturn was the outermost planet, and
Mm-hmm.
Saturn ruled everything like within the bounds and the mystery that was outside. And all of a sudden, Uranus was kind of the answer to that mystery of what is coming afterwards. And so I feel like even that it shifted the way obviously we look at Saturn because then people started to associate Uranus with Aquarius, right? And a lot of traits that were maybe Saturnian just kind of got like pushed onto Uranus or Aquarius, which again, I think now after studying like the history of astrology, I think is a bit like unjustified or makes Saturn seem a lot harsher than Saturn is because Saturn is also so mystical.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, that's, I guess, a small point I wanted to make here.
I would definitely like to jump on that point because when I think of the way that they act, two things for me is like the serpent eating its tail, and then this idea of like when you look at like this, let's say, Fortune 500 company of the top companies in the US, and I'm using the US, but wherever you're at, like the number one company, whatever. And you're looking at the building and you're like, wow, this structure, Saturn, is amazing. And everyone inside have dedicated all their life and their time to do this. But then you forget that, like, the janitor versus the person that is the CEO or the CFO have different responsibilities. And what probably makes that building stand out is probably like a good 20 people. Everyone else, not that their jobs aren't as important, because that's a part of like a community, but some people have different levels of burden than others. And I think that's the way I like to differentiate Aquarius and Saturn with that respect, because
Mm,
the star prize people, quote unquote, in there are the Aquarian people, right? They were adopted and they were like, it's not necessarily harshness of Saturn, but Saturn's like, I need these people. I need them to be
yeah.
here. And this is where it goes to that snake eating its tail, where I think Saturn has a really good, Saturn and Aquarius do this cycle where revolution versus the powers that be, the haves versus the have nots. And first, we'll just start off with the idea of the egg is there first. Let's just say that. And there is this sort of institution, and it's Saturnian. It's long standing. We have it in America. I'd like to say it's the IRS, but we've just been doing it forever. And then here comes Aquarius, and it's like, but why? Why do we do this? And I think that's the energy of Uranus. It's like, let me
Mm,
tilt on my axis and look at this a different way. Or like the
yeah.
hangman, and it's like, what's this perspective? What is this? And it's like, let's do something different. And enough time goes by where enough people, because the minority will change the world most of the time. It's the people uh, that have the most power do it. But the minority could start a rebellion or something that could cause an avalanche, a snowball effect. And then they disrupt the system. But then it's at that point that they become the next Saturn, right? And that's
Yeah.
something where Aquarius itself with Leo, I'm different. And then 5 years later, I'm the spotlight. I'm not different at all. I'm
Mhm.
exactly what everyone wants. And it's like, I think songwriters go through this where Gemini placements to me are amazing musicians, but thank God they're not like Leo, because how do they keep making their music better if they're not inspired, if they're just doing what's needed for
Mm,
mainstream to get views or whatever? That's where I look at Aquarius and Leo and I'm like, I personally put Capricorn, Aquarius, and Saturn as three brothers. Leo's the youngest, Aquarius is the middle child, and Saturn's the oldest. And they have to figure out how they affect the world without destroying it. And in that worldview, Aquarius is always tiptoeing between should I just say fuck it and just be super greedy and everything has to be about me and go to like Leo, or should I take this responsibility, this maturity that I know I'm not going to get thanked for, which is Saturn. And it's always
Yeah.
trying to pick between them. And I look at that as like the two lines. I know that's not what it is, but that's what I look. It's like, which path do I pick? And Aquarius is always in the middle, so it inevitably has to make its own path. And the two of those is like a cycle. And then once you break free, I feel like you can be your own individual Aquarius person that doesn't judge other people going a route and not taking it personal if you don't either.
Yeah, yeah. I think on breaking free, I think I want to break free by Queen is such a Uranian song in and of itself. And it's interesting because that song really, I mean, I knew it before, but that song like really kind of came back into my life that summer of
Yeah.
2023. We're going to talk about Uranus transits in a bit, which is going to make it a lot more personal. But that summer of 2023, when Venus was in Leo, squaring Uranus in Taurus, like that's when that song really like came into my life. And for me personally, it was also at that time it was directly opposing my sun and ascendant, so it was basically a T square. And I really like I felt that song like the embodiment of that song, and I was really like I do want to break free. And I do
Mhm.
think that is like one way of experiencing Uranus and feeling Uranus in your own life. It's going to give you that
Mhm.
feeling of, I want to break free from, I don't know, this shackles that have been holding me back, which might be real, might be imaginary.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of the devil card, like, are you really chained or are you just thinking that you're chained? But certainly that Uranian
Mhm.
energy, regardless, is going to come into that life and be like, we're going to create some chaos, but it's going to be
Mhm.
necessary chaos because it's going to be liberating.
Yeah.
Uranus is not about stability. Uranus is
Mhm.
everything else. But sometimes, as you said, like we need that. We need that. It might be uncomfortable, but in the long run, we need that to feel more. liberated, whatever that might look like in our lives. So, yeah.
The future isn't always the safest when you're willing to change for the better. And one of the things about the glyph of Uranus to me, I like I said before, it just looks like a warhammer, and on each side it's the way that you just nail in whatever it is that you're looking at. And I feel like that's ironic about the mythology of Ornos and Gaia and creating what look like either amazing creatures or disgusting beasts or whatever it is that Ornis was like, yeah, these are my kids. No, I don't really like them, or I like these, or I don't. And it's up to you though, to some extent, where whatever it is that comes out, at least being on Earth, I will say, you can like redirect the energy through like alchemical process and be like, this isn't what I want. I'm gonna take what I find useful and I'm gonna change and make it this. And having mutable placements, that is something I've learned with Saturn and Pisces, but that's something I've learned just being myself. And Uranus has always been overshadowing that through obstacles. So one of the hardest things right now would be like to be someone that has like fixed placements all throughout your chart, or like a fixed Mars or a fixed Mercury or fixed Sun, because this will be kind of troubling to go through this period when you can't be open to new ideas, and it's going to be things that you've never thought of, which leads to whenever I read for people that have heavy Uranus, I kind of just outline it, and it more becomes like a therapy session. I'm not licensed or anything like that, but it's like a me to you talking to a friend, because I can't really tell them what the future holds for them, and I don't even try, because Uranus is not predictable whatsoever.
Mm,
And trying to forecast it, we can do as best as we can with the definitions, but we really don't know. I would say at least we're going to get some sort of new way of communicating with each other. That'd be like the coolest thing. I saw someone wearing a translating earbud that translated real time, and it was very efficient.
mm.
And I was like, wow, I knew I didn't have to learn Spanish. You know, I've been holding out for so long to make sure. I know French, but I was like, I know a little bit of Spanish growing up in Florida, but we'll talk about that with the personal transit stuff with Uranus and Taurus. So, yeah.
Totally, totally. I think we're getting there slowly. One thing I want to add though is that and it gets a bit back to the myth, right? It's like Prometheus, the awakener, and Uranus is often seen as the planet of awakenings,
Mm-hmm.
which, might also get back to personal transits. Certainly, if Uranus is hitting your chart hard, it might be a period where you might get some sort of awakening. And
Mm-hmm.
awakenings can be freaking rough, to say the least.
Yeah.
And also, again, Uranus is the principle of the unexpected. So it's like, in a way, you're predicting that something unexpected is going to happen, but you don't know what exactly that is. But you know it's probably not going to be whatever you think it is. So, like, in a weird way, with Uranus, we can predict that it's unpredictable, which is like
Yeah.
quite ironic, but that's the energy of Uranus. Again, it's a wild card. I do think all the outer planets carry a bit of a wild card energy with them, but Uranus is like the embodiment of wild card energy where you just like kind of don't know what you're getting into, and it might be the best thing in your life or it might be the worst thing in your life. And at the end of the day, who knows, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we get put in crises moments, or like again awakenings usually come from crises moments, and they're opportunities, and maybe they suck in the beginning, but then later on you're so glad you went through that,
Yeah.
because what do you feel afterwards? You feel more freedom, and that is
Free.
Uranus. So
Yes.
I do think, if there's, or do you want to add something to that? Because otherwise, I think we can kind of like slowly start getting a bit more into just Uranus transits. But let me know if you want to add something to what I just said.
I think I just add freedom. That's the biggest thing. Throughout all this, when I look back, being a Taurus rising and looking like I take pictures, just looking at myself alone, like the amount of changes that I have gone through with Uranus and Taurus, and um the idea that you can never know. Like I really feel as though you're right. Pluto at least molds it out that you know something's gonna like be reborn. But it's like with Uranus, you really don't even know what it's supposed to look like because these other planets will have a definition, but you really just don't know. It's like an invisible cloak, and it's like what's gonna be behind door number one? Is it a bathtub with a rubber
Yeah.
ducky, or is it like a Porsche Cayenne? Like that sort of difference, like it makes no sense. So I agree with that. Yeah.
So these are how Uranus transits feel like most of the times. We can maybe start talking a bit about Uranus retrogrades, which I will say the outer planets retrograde every year. They retrograde like pretty much half of the year. So it's not in that way significant, like maybe a Venus retrograde, which is very personal, happens only every 1.5 years. And again, the outer planets are also more collective, I will say,
Mm-hmm.
unless they are, of course, directly aspecting a natal planet
Mm-hmm.
in your chart. Then the retrogrades are going to feel very personal. I know a few Taurus risings that have like late degrees, 27. Uranus just stationed there, what, like last week or something like that, just very recently. That was very loud, especially for them, right? Because gets so personal. But oftentimes we feel it or see it more collectively. Like that's what the outer planets are. They're very collective planets. That means they influence, gosh, I'm going to say collective the fifth time now. But just like the times that we are in as like humanity and as a society. So you're gonna see it kind of happen there. And yeah, so that's what I want to say about retrogrades. Let me know what you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean retrogrades. I learned about them ironically because of Uranus and Aries. So anytime that I've deep dived into like planet replacement, I first look at how it's affected me, and
Mhm.
my 12th house is subconscious. And for me, I tried to understand it by what was going on in the world. So geopolitical conflicts. And Uranus in Aries is like it's so textbook war. But during that period of time, for Americans, it was like the Obama administration and the Arab Spring and just like
Mm,
crises
true.
that kept like coming up where the Syrian war, there seems to be in history a lot of ties of that area of the world and Libra and Aries. And right now, with what's going on as well, that's Libra Aries based as well. Because when Chiron went into Aries, that seemed to bring up that conflict, and also with North and South Node in Libra.
Yeah.
This whole balance versus no balance was how I kind of figured it out. Because me having me being a Taurus rising and having Aries in the 12th house, where my Saturn also is, I was oblivious. But now I can look back and say, I had a lot of suppressed anger in
Mm,
things that were happening in my life. 12th house, 6th house, right? And it was so simple because I was juggling a lot, working, college, trying to keep up with the recommendations for my scholarship to actually get through school because I couldn't actually afford to go through school while also keeping up with affording to live. And all of these things was very stressful when for a period of time I was homeless and I didn't really have too much with me and my mom, and it was doing a lot and seeing a lot and not being able to really contribute like how I felt like I'd love
mm,
to. And that Uranus and Aries was like periods of rage. And in the retrogrades were the periods of time where I had solace. And in that same translation, Uranus and Taurus, every time it was direct, something was changing in my life. And when it went retrograde, it was like, ah, oh, peace. To the point, like in the later parts of it, where 2023 or so, when I had a little bit of peace, of course, Venus is was going through its Leo stuff, but I learned about that peaceful period with the retrogrades because every time Leo would have a retrograde, whether it was Mars or Mercury, like the square showed me things that I put too much emphasis on that did not matter, and it was disturbing my peace in the long term. But that's my chart specific. But that's how I understood the retrograde
mm.
versus maybe during retrograde periods, that's when society actually chilled out, or um, we saw less of a push towards stuff, or maybe that's when things would wane in terms of what value
Yeah.
they had. Because it's like, oh, everyone wants Labubus, and then it's like, wait, I'm paying how much for this little doll? When I could go to the dollar store and it's like, what? And then it's like I feel silly, and then the price of the value of it just drops because
Yeah.
the supply just becomes too much, and no one really needs that doll. So nothing personal if you got it in a gold or whatever.
We're not labubu shaming anyone on here, no. But yeah, I agree. I think the stations with the outer planets are usually a lot louder than like the retrograde in and of itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
when it's like stationing, because then it's when it's slowing down, and especially with Uranus, that is not a
Yes.
planet that is slowing down naturally in its essence. That tends to get very loud, and I feel like that's why also that stationing direct right now was so like in the face because it was like Uranus is picking up speed
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
and it's doing so for the last time in the sign of Taurus. Because in April, when Uranus moves into Gemini and retrogrades again, it's not going to go back into the sign of Taurus. So I think even for that, it felt like very significant. And of course, late degrees always feel more, I don't know, nervous and erratic. I think
Oh yeah.
certainly erratic is also a very Uranian word. I always, when people have Uranus, I don't know, especially like transiting the moon in some sort of way, or the
Hmm.
sun, or like the ascendant, which makes it very personal, or maybe the chart ruler. I'm always like, go and work out, like let out your energy, because
Hmm.
otherwise, like like you're gonna feel erratic. Worst case, you're gonna fall into some sort of like mini manic episode or something, because
Hmm.
Uranus tends to feel like this lightning bulb inside of you that's like waiting to explode. And that's again, that's kind of what awakening feels right like, and it's
Hmm.
electrifying. And when Uranus definitely has that electrifying circuit feeling to it. And
Hmm.
so I always advise people, and that's from my personal experience of Uranus, like opposing my sun and ascendant, like do something, like let out that energy. Otherwise, it can easily consume you, and you're going to have sleepless nights, and you don't necessarily want that. Even though, again, it's sometimes that's how artists create their best albums or how inventions
Yeah.
come about.
Yeah.
And that's Uranus as well.
Yeah. It's so packed in, that's like the Scorpio exaltation. You're just like
Yeah.
so pumped up. Whenever it's Aquarius season and I have a stellium in my 10th house, I can't sleep. And
I can
it's
imagine.
it's just I'm just up. Too many ideas, too many thoughts. With Jupiter when it was in Gemini, that was also insane because I had four journals I was writing in every day of different
Mm.
stuff. But it was just too much. And at the end of the day, you just got left with nothing that was consistent. But I feel like this is just me. If the whole collective is going through this energy, we can pour in so much. And the energy thing is so real because like I remember I was fortunate enough to do like a little small group like learning before he launched his actual school of the Sacred Seven. James Burgess was having his Uranus opposition and he hurt himself. And I was like, you hurt he had hurt his wrist. And I was like, how did you hurt your wrist? And he was like, I was outside chopping wood. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, this is a man in his 80s and he lives alone. Why would he be chopping his own wood? And he was like, I just had the ability to, so I did it. And it's watching him because I know that in a sense he would know better, but he still had so much energy. The late degrees of this is going to be like a send off without a doubt. Just like when it first ingressed, when Uranus and Algol were conjunct, and we saw an assassination attempt, and also at the same time a health crisis for the current president. And it was like it's gonna be big, whatever it is. Hopefully, it's not too much of a send off. I would love for it to be small and just give us the surprises with Uranus and Gemini because I really don't want any more of that. But it's the stationings are scary based on history. They really do pack a punch. And I feel like Taurus is like this. Have you ever like tried to push something through mud? And it's like
Mm,
as you're pushing it, there's more stuff. Like if you're not like lifting up whatever it
yeah.
is through mud, it starts to really pack up there. And at some point in time, let's say you're pushing it on an incline or decline, it's like there is a leverage or something. And when it stations, it's like if you're not constantly pushing, it just hits you back and you're just holding all this. And I feel like that could happen. Or the send off to Gemini could be like, we're pushing downwards and you're speeding up, which maybe it's not better
Yeah.
because once you start to pick up speed, it just moves on its own. And you're like, oh, this is awesome. But what's on the other side of that? All that mud in front of that is going to slam something, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
I fully agree. I think, obviously, news-wise, we usually see the worst because that's the headlines. We don't
Yeah.
see so much of the good stuff, even though there's so many good things that are happening as
Mm-hmm.
well that are also have been Uranus and Taurus for the past 7 years and that are Uranus and Gemini, but it's usually just the headlines, and then sometimes
Mm-hmm.
as an astrologer you wonder like, why does it always have to be like the negative
Mm-hmm.
negative way it's presenting itself? But there's certainly also good things
Mm-hmm.
happening in the back with all of that. I think the send off is gonna be rough,
Yeah.
as you said, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it a lot. And it's like, the mutable signs are gonna get Uranus and Gemini in the angular houses. That's going to be a
Yeah.
very different, it's very personal when the outer planets are in the angular spaces.
It is.
We talked about this before because we already experienced Uranus a bit in Gemini last year, and
Mm-hmm.
both of us were like not fully yet feeling it, but both of us can definitely remember when Uranus entered Taurus across our
Yeah.
like first and seventh house axis, because that was very, very loud. I don't know if you want to like maybe share your story with this. You already said a few tidbits, but I think it's worth exploring that.
God, I've got to say, good luck to the mutables. Good luck. Godspeed. Whatever you believe in, you're gonna need it because truthfully, I just wasn't ready. And I don't think you could ever be ready, but it was so annoying as a fixed sign. I'm Taurus rising. I have Haitian heritage, and as I told you, like in my culture, you are either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, or else you're a
Mhm.
failure. And this has been so true to the point where, it's just like if you're an immigrant into this country, like you need to go into STEM basically, or you're nothing. And it's this idea that I hate so much. But for me personally, I have 1 degree MC of Aquarius, and so when Uranus went in, I felt that.
Mm,
I told you about how in 2019 I got let go from a position because of I was training someone and I was also under management of someone else, and the person I was training made a mistake that I was actually teaching them. And they shouldn't have actually done it, but they wanted to help so badly. And they made a mistake that would have led to a malpractice for the physicians. And so I had to be the fall guy for the situation. And I just remember thinking, what the hell? Like it pissed me off.
oh
But at the
yeah.
same time, Uranus, it also opened an opportunity for me to enter the financial markets. And during that period of time as well, because I'm a Taurus rising and my fourth house is Leo, a big part of my growing up was you got to go into medical route. You have to do this. And that's what I was pushing for the whole first part of my life until the first echoes of maybe I don't want to go into med school
Mm,
came in 2017 when I was shadowing for this thing called scribe, and you're basically following around physicians, and I was just like, I could never fucking do this for the whole day. Like, I could do it for about 3 hours,
yeah.
but like after that, the paperwork, the basically lying for insurance, not them, but like having to check off stuff because of insurance and all this other stuff. I was like, growing up, my biggest thing was I just want to be free. And so if I have enough to travel when I want, have a home, and not owe anyone anything, I felt like I was rich because although I did have some of those things, it wasn't the way that I wanted it to be. It was
Mm,
always through the lens of something that's not mine, right? And so Uranus kind of flipped that Taurus Leo axis of Taurus being the legacy, and I think Leo risings, as I mentioned, will understand this because you guys have a legacy to carry. In fact, I like to look at Leo rising as the image of like the British monarchy, or,
mhm.
it's just you have to carry this tradition that's not yours,
Yeah,
and
agreed.
having Uranus squaring my sun, I've never liked tradition. I've hated it because it faults in the fact that it refuses to look at itself and want to be better or grow or at least allow other opinions. And personally, my thing that shattered was going to go through and become a medical professional. I don't have anything against people that do it. I don't hate them for it. I'm not, you do what you have to do, but I realized it wasn't for me. And during that period of time, and then of course, having the financial markets having just slumped and completely get gutted because of COVID, it was like a red carpet to get in and really get lucky, which I have learned lessons for. But and then kind of step back from that and do something that actually brings me joy to now where the other side of my chart is activated more so because of Uranus. So while I hate it,
Mm,
I'm grateful because what was my IC and my rising is now my descendant, where my sun is at and my Mercury is at, and then my midheaven, which is where my MC, my Jupiter, my Uranus. I get to do astrology and understand people, and I get to talk to them and really dig deep into them. And then I get to interact with the financial markets and understand what's going on with the world financially and what is it that's happening. Because if you follow the money, you get a lot of answers to a lot of things, um, it's it's been a gift, but it's been a painful journey without a doubt. And then um, I've changed my hair. My hair is in its natural state. I've changed my hair so much during this transit,
I can
so
imagine.
much. And every time we've had a Leo transit or retrograde in my fourth house, I just learned some sort of trauma about my childhood and why I do something because the
Mm,
representation is so big. So, how that relates to me and what I actually want to do, bringing myself out of my shell to do something like this. If I went back to the 13, 14, 15 version of me, like it would never happen. Um, I would never be on this podcast. During that transit also gave me social media. I was not on anything. I was knee deep in what people are now learning about these so-called files, and I was like really young learning about that and freaking out because I was
oh,
like,
yeah.
no one's talking about this. I was a kid and I was just like, I literally got so petrified at that point in time. I was a part of the church that I was raised in because of my parents. And I remember talking to one of our youth pastors, and I was like, I'm gonna die. I was like, I'm gonna get kidnapped, and my blood's gonna get taken, and all this stuff. And he was like, that's not gonna happen. Don't worry. The world can't be that way. And now with revelations about that, we don't have to dive into that, but it's like that's another thing that I've come to accept, and I don't attack myself over it. But I used to be so much more active in trying to prove to people what's really happening, which is a very Uranian thing, Aquarius thing. And now I've just accepted that everyone's on their own time. And being first doesn't mean you have to run outside and be like, this is what it is. Because 9 out of 10 times, the world is not going to understand. And it's not saying that you have to just give up and never try to show people a different perspective. But it is saying that if anything, because you know something maybe a little bit earlier than people, you can set up a pathway for people to see it. And I fundamentally believe right now that all of us that are doing astrology are early. We like even the people that started mid 2010s, they're so early because as Pluto leaves, its energy completely is like gone and we move away and we transition into this next state of humanity. Uranus and Taurus removing that stabilization, we are going to
Mm,
see how. that capitalism doesn't sustain long term. It does not at this level. It
Yeah.
won't
Yeah.
sustain, and it'll be different, and we're gonna do things differently. So it's gonna become an economy of how I feel, who am I, how I connect.
Mm,
And what you're doing right now is like the forefront of it. It's just going to take some years, but people will come around and they'll be like, wow, like, yeah, this is what I need to know. This is what I need to understand. So,
yeah.
yeah, I feel ready for that in a way because of Uranus and Taurus, even though I hate it. I will say it feels like it's giving me a gift.
Preparation. Yeah, yeah. What did I want to say? Well, I was riffing off of, we were talking about like how it was affecting us, right?
Yeah.
I feel like my story, I don't know, but let me just start with it. So Uranus was in my seventh house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, still is in my seventh house of right now. And again, that Ingress was really, really ra loud. Usually when I talk to people, I'm always like, oh, don't focus so too much on the outer planets because
Mm-hmm.
they affect generations, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, look at them when they're hitting personal planets. And I still stand by that because obviously then it's going to be the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
But that Uranus entering the seventh house, even though I don't have anything at like any beginning degrees really, that was just very, very loud. And I think it's because it was specifically an angular house. And again, Uranus like delved into Taurus in like 2018, but then 2019 was when it was fully, and that's like really exactly 7 years ago because it was like end of February or beginning of March or something like that when it happened. And at that time, I was in Japan doing a language trip. So I was going and learning Japanese. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, and I just, is that feeling when you like board the plane or you do something, and you're just like, I know I'm gonna come back like a different person. Like I just knew deep down, like this is gonna change me. And I don't have that always with things, but this I just knew as soon as I boarded that plane that when I'm coming back a month later, like I'm not gonna be the same person. And there was also this feeling, even though that might not just be Uranus, but basically one evening where we're like, somebody was like, let's go clubbing, blah, blah, blah. And, that's like not really what I do. At least not at that time. I wasn't so interested in that. But it was this feeling of like, Amiya, when are you going to be in Japan? Like that, like take that opportunity and go there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of did the unexpected thing, the disruptive thing, a bit of like this YOLO attitude, I guess. And all of that led me to then basically during that night kind of start falling for this person that was also there, which initially I was like, that person annoys me so much. Like, like like the first impression you have of someone, you're
Yeah.
just like, oh yeah, that's like not my type of person. And
Mm-hmm.
for some reason that evening, like all of that developed in a completely different, unexpected direction, which, you know, all of that kind of got like really wild. I don't want to like tell the whole story because it's a bit personal, but essentially it flipped, turned upside down my whole relationship life and what I
Mm-hmm.
think relationships are, what they should be, what I thought a relationship even is, or what I need from it, or what I can give. And and I was talking to you before about that. I think seventh house transits can be really interesting because oftentimes, like, yes, it is personal, but it is other people bringing things into our life. So it's not that I was Uranian, even though certainly I had a bit of that YOLO attitude, but it's that person that came into my life that embodied that Uranian energy, which really ended up changing my life. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like indirectly personal through another person. And then again, a few years later, 2023, fateful summer of 2023 when Venus was in Leo and
Ah.
yeah, squaring Uranus and Taurus. And I guess Jupiter was there at that time as well, if I'm not mistaken. And again, like I had a similar experience, even though completely different person, right? That initial experience really changed my view on relationship. But what was interesting during that summer of 2023 is that I started for the first time, and I think it's also because Jupiter was there as well, but like the idea of like polyamory and what that would be,
Mm-hmm.
like came into my life. Even though right now I'm like not really on that path anymore, or however you want to say that, but that like really like came into my life, that idea. And it's something that I've read upon, like Uranus going into the seventh house can be that like radical realization of like what are relationships, how do I
Mm-hmm.
have them, and polyamory certainly is, the unconventional way of having relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's really interesting how at that point that was really present in my life. And once again, it came into my life through another person that was already living that out, and then
Mm-hmm.
expanded again my worldview on what relationships are. Even though again, I'm so happy Uranus is leaving my my seventh house.
Yeah.
I'm like,
That.
I want to have some stability in my relationships, please, because now
Mm-hmm.
I've just been, I feel like completely always just sucked into this vortex of, don't get attached. Let it be what it needs to be. Let it show you what it needs to show you. And I'm like, okay, it's enough now, I think. So, but that is Uranus energy. It's just not stability. And when it enters these, especially angular houses,
Mm-hmm.
but whatever house it is, it just kind of really destabilizes the notion you have of that thing. So when
Yeah.
Uranus now is going to enter Gemini, whatever house is going to enter in your life, it's going to destabilize the things you think you know about the topics that it is activating. And that's how Uranus and transits feel like when they come into our lives.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yeah,
First and
please.
foremost, uh, two things. So one, as a Taurus rising, and then having a Scorpio descendant, and my son is there. I have to tell you, I get it. I really tried to stay away from fixed signs, and I did it naturally, and I didn't know even before I knew astrology. I just could not handle fixed signs because they altered me because of my seventh house sun. And then also to piggyback with that, Uranus and Taurus indirectly forced me to look at solar return charts. I didn't look at them until like 2022, like seriously. And I
Mm,
only did that because Uranus and Taurus was having fun every year in a different house of my chart. And I went back and really sat down and I was like, but why does things show this way? And I think like all the charting systems come together anyway to tell you what's happening. So it's not like it's better. But I love the solar return chart because what it'll do is focus for the year. And when I
yeah.
tell you, I've looked at what was going on in my life with Uranus and Taurus, and the two biggest ones were the seventh house and the 10th house, and what it did to me with my career. Uh, but I completely understand that seventh house transit because I was a solar um, return Scorpio rising last year, and it's just changed my perception of the long-term stability of a relationship actually. But before that, I was in the same boat as you where there were so many different things being thrown my way, but I was trying to be so focused on the goal I had for the year. I was focused on
Mm,
my moon in Leo. And but if I had delved into that, I was like, wow, there's so much different ways of quote unquote dating that I'd never thought of even before that, even in college. I just never saw things to
yeah.
be that way. And I'm curious now if when Uranus goes into your eighth house, you'll see like, oh, there's more in the long term of it, or how you and another person can make it work versus just what probably feels like random things and you feeling strung along with things that aren't even yours because it's not a you sort of house, it's you through others. So that's really
Mm.
cool though. The Amiya experience of I'm gonna go to Japan and let's see what happens. I come back and learning a whole bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I went there was not because of that. It was
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to learn Japanese.
Yep.
So that's Uranus. You go on a trip for one thing, or you start school for whatever reason, and then it's just like, oh, what if we do a completely different path? Like for you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what if instead of being a doctor, we do a completely different thing? And so that is, and that again, that can be uncomfortable, right? Because I mean, first of all, we're very fixed heavy, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I think for most people, when we have this notion of like this is kind of what we planned and doesn't go our ways, most people aren't like, yay, I love that it's not going my way. Like that's usually not
Yeah.
the initial reaction. But I do think I don't know, I don't know if it's an antidote or just a way to handle Uranus is to surrender. I think Uranus has a bit of a similar energy like eclipses, which I think is so interesting that is like Uranus is present right now during this solar eclipse we're getting in Aquarius, because I
Hmm.
think eclipses also carry this wild card energy where you're kind of like forced to surrender to the chaos and let yourself be guided through it to come out in a different way and just kind of like trust the process, if I can put it that way,
Yeah.
which is never easy if your life is being completely destabilized from the inside out. But that is a lot of, I think, what Uranus transits feel like or do in our lives. Yeah, and it's never, I don't think, I don't think Uranus is here to like punish us or anything. I think it's here to expand us, even though I know expansion is like a more Jupiterian term. But I do think Uranus certainly stretches us when it comes to our ideas or our notions and what we think something is or isn't, or even what we are capable of. Right? I'm sure you felt that. I know a lot of Taurus risings, all of us,
Yeah.
like, however you looked like at the beginning, you look completely different right now. Like different hair, different style, different everything. I know so many Taurus risings that started working out during that transit and like
Same.
gains, and I'm like, that's, altering your appearance completely. Like that is Uranus. Again,
Hmm.
depending on which house it is obviously affecting it in your chart. So, yep.
Yeah. Heavy on the working out. I actually saw a lot of them do that too, or just doing like physical activities that
Hmm.
they would have never done before
Yeah.
at all. And they're like, you know what? I don't care about my life. Let's go rock. Let's go mountain climbing. Let's go cycling through the forest. Let's go deep sea diving. What's this about staying home and doing what's safe? No, no, no. Let's do something else. I saw that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Uranus, like the interesting part about it is always like doing the radical thing, which is different for everyone. For people that are more used to being adventurous or something, the radical thing might be to actually stay at home and
Hmm.
I don't know, focus on pleasure and all, like I think for a lot of people that was also Uranus and Taurus. If they were used to some other things of like, oh, the radical experience of like I'm going to be present in my body and I'm going to regulate my nervous system and I'm going to experience beauty and pleasure. And then for other people that maybe this is the more default mode, their radical thing was doing the opposite of that, like like going more into discomfort.
Hmm.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
We are back from a small little break, and we're going to continue talking about transits with Uranus. We also like the outer planets, and then we're going to talk a bit about medical astrology afterwards, how to build a relationship to Uranus, and then at the end, as always, we're going to read the Orphic hymns. And we were already talking a bit about like personal transits before, which are definitely very important. Again, I can just reiterate that Uranus, if it's hitting your personal planets, it's going to be the loudest. That's when you're going to feel it the most. But then I think the outer planets are very interesting when we look at collective cycles because they are so slow moving. Uranus takes 7 years pretty much to go through a sign. So there's like a 7 year cycle. And then it's going to also interact with other planets that way, right? They're slower moving planets. So if they interact with slower moving planets, it's going to take a while for things to develop. And that's why they're also much more about the collective and the culture because things are shifting like on a slower pace globally. Yes. And maybe we can also talk a bit about I guess, and this is a bit more personal again, but like Uranus return maybe, or like the Uranus opposition, because that is also like universally something that every one of us is going to get at the same time or at the same age.
Hmm. Hmm. You know, I definitely think that the transit in terms of affecting all of us was so much like historically 1934 through 1941 Uranus transiting Taurus, it kind of did what it's done now. You know, it's not, it didn't cause a world war, but it definitely had some depression like effects where there was the Dust Bowl and there was also the Great Depression. This is like at least America's like point of view, and it basically needed a recalibration. Whereas in this period where we just went through it from 2018 and the last degrees of, or the halfway point more so to the last, of Pluto and Capricorn really exhausted us. And it's not
Mm.
necessarily a financial depression. In some ways, it feels like that after like the Great Conjunction, but it was so much of like an overhaul because you're like exhausted. And I feel as though in the same way that personal transits of like Uranus and Taurus for like Taurus risings made them actually physically do things, the transit for society was like maybe you should do less of things. Um, it paved a way where when Uranus was squaring Saturn and Aquarius, the term quiet quitting just like magically popped up.
Mm.
And it's like this whole notion that you're just working a job and you're doing as little as you can. And then also before someone finally accepts something, it's almost like they have to hit rock bottom. And for Uranus and Taurus, when it would station direct or whenever it'd go retrograde, I feel like people would kind of like relapse and be like, I gotta hustle. I gotta really work. I gotta really do this thing. And I saw this in the Gemini risings because Uranus was messing them up. You know, those were people who climbed to the apex of something they wanted and then came to realize that actually this doesn't fuel my desire, right? It almost makes me depressed, right? Because
Mm, yeah.
they just couldn't find a sense of meaning. And for them, their second house being fueled so much in what gives them comfort and safety in that meaning, it no longer worked, right? Pluto opposing that for them was like, it was just so much. And that hustle culture is now dying because Pluto's out of Capricorn, but Uranus was like, this cannot stay structured. So we saw the boom and bust of different stuff financially, but then also sustainability, how we basically feed the world. What is actually viable? We saw Neptune through social media and Pisces show us what everyone's life was,
Yeah.
and Uranus having sextiles to that Neptune at different points in time made you feel really sad. I've always said Pisces and Earth signs will give you existential depression or
I
like
agree. Yeah.
existential crisis. Yeah, like you really feel like, damn, am I doing enough, or do I have enough Capricorn, Virgo, or is this enough Taurus? And it just made you sit with it and say like, is everything just like localized in power? Can we like break it up? And that's where Gemini is going to show that as well. But it's like, are we aware of our environment where we live? Environmental crisis that just kept coming up and seeing how our earth is changing and the climate. So all of this comes back into the tangible stuff, which is what you do, what you eat, and where you're at, your shelter. And I feel as though that's the hard hitting stuff that this transit did the most. You got to be aware of the things that you do, because if you affect the climate then affects the food that we eat. And if the food that we eat itself is eating food that isn't nutritious,
Mm,
we're in
yeah.
the chain of that, not getting food, which then leads to us being tired anatomically. And then that then affects, let's say, our gut. And then you can't work the same way or you're exhausted. And it's all of these things that Uranus and Taurus is
Yeah.
like, this foundation is just like horrible, right? You got to be aware of it. So, yeah, it's a new beginning now, leaving that phase, which I'm excited for.
It is a new beginning now. I mean, Uranus is going to enter Gemini, what, April 27th, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken.
Mhm.
um, ushering a new era. I feel like I want to pull a bit from the book from Ren Butler here,
Mhm.
called The Archetypal Universe. I think it just so great. I mean, Ren Butler closely kind of worked with Richard Tarnas, the godfather of like outer planetary transits and what
Yeah.
they do in the world. And also like in psychedelic therapy and everything. But I do just like it as this easy cookbook to kind of reach for like words to grasp what is happening. And I want to like focus a bit on Uranus, Neptune first, and then we can talk a bit more about Uranus, Pluto, which is two
Mhm.
completely different energies.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm gonna kind of going to read the principles here a bit with Uranus, Neptune, which is the more like positive or pleasant side are revolutionary changes in consciousness, an exciting rebirth of vision and idealism, feelings of cosmic unity and compassion, transcendence in every direction, the open universe. And then the more like shadow qualities, I guess, are tendencies towards escapism and fantasy, hyperstimulation by imagery, wishful thinking, and lack of discernment, religious and spiritual extremism. And I think the fact that we now at delayed degrees, we did kind of get both. I think last year we got, I think, Uranus Neptune sextile when both of them were in Gemini and Aries, and but the last one we had was when they were back in Pisces and Taurus. And I feel
Mhm.
like, especially in Pisces and Taurus, it really brought back or brought forth these shadow qualities. I do hope that now, and I think maybe it's because Pluto is at play here and they're all like in a harmonic relationship to each other, that
Mhm.
there is a lot of potential to yeah, like revolutionary changes in consciousness just makes so much sense for me with Aries and Gemini energy, and an exciting rebirth of vision and idealism. That is, I
Mhm.
mean, even just Saturn and Neptune conjunction that we're having in just a few days is so much of that
Yeah.
energy as well. And so when Uranus joins the club here with going into Gemini, I think it's gonna amplify a lot of that.
Mhm. I I look at the aspects of the two planets, and I think it really just keeps coming back to freedom. I don't know that what you're saying is correct. That's not like without a doubt. But I think about how the energies of itself is uncontrollable.
Hmm.
And if we get these aspects alongside with this basket formation that I've heard up and down about in the middle of summer with all the outer planets, where Pluto, the Jupiter and Leo, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus really just puts humanity in like this cradle, and it just like spins it around in circles, and it just shakes it. It's like if you put food into like a microwave box and you just shake it and then you heat it up, and it's completely different from what you wanted. Like I've had a phase when I was younger where it was almost autistic in a way that I didn't like my food mixed together. And then all of a sudden, I will never forget this. One of my aunts was sick and tired of my mom supporting that, and she actually purposely mixed my food. And I was so against it. I was so against it. And I tried it. And I just remember thinking, whoa. And from there on, if I ever get food, you know, I will mix it together if I can. Like I'll shake it because the end all result is always something way better than when it was nicely separated. And that's what I feel like this aspect really does. It brings freedom and then it brings indifference, so that way you're almost at a buffet. You make that future for yourself that the transits before, they would have kind of lulled you into feeling like you have to do it a certain way, it needs to feel this way. And it's like, not really. It can be different, and it can kind of like the conversation we are having before, where it's like, differences of opinion are okay, and it's not necessarily us versus them. It could just be you and how you reflect on the collective.
Agreed. I was just thinking of Hannah Montana before, which is, mix it all together and it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. Hannah Montana.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting sandwich globally to to bite on with these energies here. And I think I don't know exactly when that was, but when Uranus and Neptune conjoined in Capricorn, I believe it was late 80s or something like that,
Uh-huh.
or beginning
Yeah.
of the 90s. But that is, I think, that is certainly like the generation that kind of started to really, question like, oh, are the traditional values okay? Should we do something different? So we
Mhm.
see it there as well, especially in a sign Capricorn, which a lot of people do associate with traditional things and things that like stood the test of time and have been going on for a while now. And then, this generation kind of coming here and being born and like really like restructuring and taking that apart, also in their own lives respectfully. So yeah, you can also see it obviously in charts. There's always going to be like generationally wise, there's going to be things that stand out. We were also talking about Gen Z before. I mean, both of us have Neptune still in Capricorn, but I would say most of the early Gen Zs are like the Uranus in Aquarius, which we both also
Mhm.
have, but also most of them also have Neptune in Aquarius. And that like signature of having these two planets in this sign and
Mhm.
this kind of really being that generation which like one of the generation that is most gender non-conforming, very like fluid in how they express themselves and don't want
Mhm.
to maybe like attach meaning or something in a way also,
Mhm.
right, very detached from identifying with anything. Again, it goes into extremes, it goes in both ways. Also very collectivist, right, like the generation that is kind of known for really caring about like global events, global issues, climate
Mhm.
change, all these things. And you can kind of really see it again, generation wise, when you look at these conjunctions that are happening in the sky, but then are expressing itself through multitudes of people born during that time as well, which we talked about this before, in 30 years, if we're when we're still astrologers and somebody's going to come in and want a reading and their chart is going to be Saturn Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's really funny that you brought up Hannah Montana because Miley Cyrus, the alternative ego of that, you know, she's a 28-degree Taurus rising. And I remember looking this up
Oh.
around the time I was trying to find out like what Neptune was doing. It was a few years ago. And I looked it up and people had theories because she released that song Wrecking Ball around
Mm.
August of 2013, and that had affected her status in life. But it was Neptune having an aspect to like almost close to her Venus, Mars, and Uranus, and she's in that generation of the late 80s to early 90s where
Mhm,
they had
mhm.
Uranus and Neptune. And I look at that and I'm like, what a beautiful precursor to before Uranus actually gets into Taurus. And that conjunction, it's just so disruptive, right? Of course, like Saturn and Neptune that we'll be going through, but really like Uranus is really going to push things to a better level. And I feel like that group of people that now have the Aquarius and Uranus and Neptune really are going to stand up for things that happen around the world because things are going to get like, I say tokenized as a way to say things are going to be in their own boxes,
Yeah.
but it's like you can play with it almost like Jenga to build up a network and infrastructure where everyone gives their piece. And that's what I've been pushing for people, where it's like, don't let what you are define yourself, but use this piece so that you can push into something else that the collective needs besides you.
Agreed on that. Um, is there anything else you want to say on Neptune Uranus? Because otherwise, I'm gonna
No, we can move
start
on.
talking about Uranus and Pluto. That's a
Yeah.
bit different. That's a bit more volatile.
Yeah. Yeah, we can move on to that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna again just share what Ren Butler kind of has to say here on the principles. The titanic quest for human freedom and individuation, driving forces of evolution and revolution, the sense of participating in an epic death rebirth struggle. Yeah, I can see that. Erotic emancipation and awakening of natural and Dionysian energies, volcanic ecstasy. And then the more like shadow qualities would be a tendency toward driving manic energies, fanatical idealism and obsession with change at any cost, urges for external revolution without adequate processing of one's inner emotional material forces of material and oh my god, comma forces of cataclysm and upheaval. And it's, I mean,
Yeah.
we can see that, right?
Yeah, I can see it already.
We can totally see that. I think Uranus Pluto always just if Uranus feels like a lightning bulb, I feel like Uranus Pluto together feel like that volcano that is just
Mhm.
about to erupt. And when they come together, it is erupting and it is doing a lot.
Yes.
Fast and a lot. And Uranus Pluto. There's also been a documentary, Changing of the Gods, which I briefly want to shout out here, featuring also Richard Tarnas that came out a few years ago,
Mhm.
which I think lays a very good framework. Like if anybody listening to this wants to like dive really deep into that. And like this Uranus Pluto cycles where we can just see there's lots of upheaval, again, lots of revolutionary energy, lots of protests happening. Yeah, that's what I have to say at first, but I'm not gonna let you talk more.
Yeah, I was about to bring up that that's a really nice way to quote it. I kind of want that book because it was so tasteful. Like for instance, like Richard Tarnas, his work is thick. Like it's so there's so much verbose. There's so much words, and like my vocabulary is not the standard that he is, but I've looked at him and I've been like, wow, that's so cool because he has Jupiter in Aquarius just like us, and
True.
it's been such a cool thing to see how he's matured. And I'm using him because he has Uranus at 1 degree of Cancer, and during during that time, Uranus was in Cancer, and I've learned that these people really had such a brunt, like I have to try and heal the world, compared to
Mm,
what we're talking about, which is Pluto and Uranus, and it's the Leo people.
yeah.
I've always looked at Uranus and Leo and thought of like heavy metal because it's so anarchist. But with Pluto and Uranus together in Leo, it is what I think people complain about now as the baby boomers, but it's so much about like me versus everyone. And it's the same, it's like a polar opposite, right? Of course, Uranus is not in um Aquarius unless you have it natally, but the the Uranus and Gemini trine there, it gives an adjacent drive to like change and innovate. And my only thing where I'd be like, wow, the fear of it is what we deal with now, where 1939 to 1958, these people had a hotbed of possibilities. And now we're going to see a hotbed of possibilities as well. And hopefully we don't lose our sense of humanity. Like, we talked about AI, but that seems to be something that I could think of where that deceiving quality of
Mm,
Pluto is
mhm.
like we're getting better, and then you look back and it's like, but who's with us still, right? Who is actually still here on this train ride? Um, to use that Snowpiercer reference, like, are we leaving people back in the previous carriages and it's getting full? And we're just
Yeah.
showing face to say things are getting better. This is happening, but it's not at all. And that is why this aspect is so powerful. Things will change, but I always sit back and I'm like, how does everyone benefit from this? Hopefully everyone can. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, and he says it here like fanatical idealism and obsession with change at any cost. I think that explains it
Yeah.
very well. And, this is not the Pluto episode. I'm certainly going to talk more about it when I get there. But the fact that the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the French Revolution, and I'm like that is literally exactly what happened there. You know, it started as an initial idea. Uh, that was, I would say base level, a good idea. And then
Mhm.
eventually it kind of got out of control where it was just like this obsession with like we need to change at any cost. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden it was not just the elites and royals getting beheaded, but it was just everyone that
Oh my
didn't follow the
God.
ideas of the Age of Enlightenment and everything. So I'm like, I can totally see that coming here where, and I think it's this thing where we're gonna get into just more destabilizing times in
Yeah.
the future, and eventually we're gonna get used to it. And I feel like once you're in it, and and I guess the large part of the collective maybe realizes that okay, we're in it now, so the only way out is through. And all of a sudden, it becomes this what is said here, like this obsession with like, oh, we just need to change everything now. Everything's falling
Yeah.
apart. Let's just wreak havoc. Because that is Uranus Pluto too. Like they very much can wreak havoc and take things out of control. Pluto also, I think I heard it at Chris Brennan's the astrology podcast, and I don't know if it's him that said it or he was quoting someone, but he said that Pluto tends to make big things small and small things big. And that's
Yes.
exactly this, it can easily get into proportions that none of us can even imagine. And yeah, it's like in a way exciting, but also terrifying at the same time because, like, who knows what's gonna happen once we're like knee deep in all of this and it's, I don't know,
Yeah.
2033 or something.
Just saying that is like 2033.
I know, crazy.
Um, no, I definitely get that because I got Pluto on my MC and I remember that. I actually remember him saying that where it's like the things that I used to see as big have like shrunken so much because I don't have enough time for it. And the things that I never thought would be such a big deal, it's like I can't avoid it.
Mm,
It's like it's so close in front of me that like I have to look at it. And my fear is that change acceleration, like you said. It's almost like a centrifuge and it just keeps spinning and it keeps spinning and then it spins so fast that it's like when you look at something moving too many frames per second and it looks like it's slow, or like a helicopter blade
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
just standing there, like nothing's actually happening. And that would be a definite worrisome shadow because it's this whole idea of like shock and awe. Like everything is a spike to your dopamine, or it has to be this way. And this is where Gemini becomes tricky because we spoke a lot about how great this can be, but also at the same time, this can be absolutely horrifying. And I've reserved to not try to assume so I don't give myself
Yeah.
anxiety thinking about that because this is so surreal. I'm not avoiding it. I'm not sticking my head in the sand, but I'm also cognizant that like I can't control the world.
Yeah.
Um, I know that you'll talk about it in your podcast, but the Pluto really does bring that fanaticism a lot. I know right now it's like, what the people in Los Angeles are being tore down. I'm not going to name it, but at some point the pendulum will swing back the other way. And it's the people today that it's going to be like, okay, well, how do we tear them down? And
Yeah.
this idea that like Jesus had fans and they still crucified him. It was the same fans, his disciples were the same ones, and it just seems like a pendulum. And thankfully, we're on the different side, but I'd hate to be the Pluto and Leo generation right now because you're catching strays on all sides. And for the ones
Agreed.
that didn't actually contribute, my heart goes out for them because if people, it's everywhere. If someone's trying to rent a home or buy a home, they got a baby boomer to blame in their back pocket. So it's that sort of idea where what will it look like 2030s from now? The start. Is it going to be a clear line in the sand, or is it so many lines in the sand that it looks crazy?
Yeah, I really like the image you explained with this, like when you spin something and then eventually it looks like nothing's happening, even though
Mm-hmm.
everything is kind of happening. And it's gonna be weird, right? Like right now we're gonna get into destabilizing times and we kind of need that. That's just how it works, right? I often like to reference uh what was it? God as God, generator, operator, destroyer. And I think right
Ooh,
now we're at the destroyer
that is
destroying
fire. I
phase
like
of
that.
everything, which is like very much needed. And then eventually there's going to become a stabilizing phase again, and things will pick up. And it might be when, I don't know, Uranus moves into Cancer, like certainly that's going to be a different energy. It's certainly going to be completely different in 2044, which is also crazy to think about when Pluto fully moves into Pisces.
Uh,
Just thinking about,
this
like, oh, I'm gonna
no,
be almost 50, but
I'm not gonna think about that personally.
these are exactly, yeah. But it's again, it doesn't do anything good to future trip too hard, I think. I think it's just good to know where we're at, and I think the gift of Aquarius and also the curse of it is like detachment, where like you can detach in a healthy way where you see like, oh, it's like an archetypal lens. Everything is archetypes.
Hmm.
And at the same time, right, it can be toxic. But I do think it's one way to cope with what is going on. It certainly helps me. So that's just what I want to tell people. I don't know if you have anything more to add on Uranus Pluto here.
I don't, but I'll say that God analogy. I would like your permission to use that because
Oh,
I
please. It's on
it
mine.
is it is so amazing. I immediately thought of three, the numerology, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Like that is such a good one. Generator, operator, destroyer. I like that.
Heck yeah. I think it comes from like I know the guru of my parents used that, and that comes like from a tantric yogic lineage.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
very Uranus Pluto in and of itself, I would say.
Hmm.
Okay,
Oh
and
yeah, I just
let's,
saw that.
oh, sorry, what do you want to say?
No, I just looked it up and I saw that it's the Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Yeah, that's so cool.
That's Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. No, I don't know, but it would fit
It
well.
might be. Yeah,
It
yeah.
would certainly fit well. Um, should we talk a bit about like Uranus returns? Not that we're like pros at it, we're because we're both very far away from experiencing Uranus returns. And I think I think there's maybe one or two people that I've done readings for that even like experienced or were just about to enter a Uranus return. So it's not
Mm,
something I personally encounter so much. But just the fact Uranus return happens at 84 years old. So
hmm.
when you
Yeah, I
get to
mean,
your 80s,
I would say that I just like you don't have as much experience. I think I've had like less than five. I've been lucky enough to have like over I think maybe 11 or 12 people in their like late 90s that I've been able to do a reading for.
that's
But
so good.
I know it's like seeing it's I nerded out because it's like placements I don't get to see every day, you know,
Exactly.
and I'm just like it's like a toy. And from my personal experience, it's usually just a natural dark night of the soul for them, but it doesn't always have to be like a bad thing. It's just something they weren't ready for. And it's never just the transit itself, believe it or not. It's in tangent to something else. So it's almost as if like the Uranus itself is the car, and then the other outer planets with one inner planet or two will be the people in the car, the
Mm.
color of the car, the speed the car can go. That's Uranus, but it'll be everything else. And I've come to realize that when they have their return, it's so much more of an enabling of something they need to let go or change or do. And that just goes back to what I feel like is Uranian in of itself. It's like, hey, resuscitate, like do something else. This is what you need to look at. This is, and so far, most of the people that have Uranus right now are from like Leo all the way to I mean, the ones that have gotten their returns anyway.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's not like we have too much under our belt to really. test out and see, oh yeah, this is this. More so the oppositions. Like when Uranus was in Aries, I did a few readings for people that had Uranus in Libra, and it was a fight for what it is that they believed in
Yeah.
and their equality and their marriages and that stuff. That was very textbook. But Uranus and Taurus has definitely rocked a lot of Uranus and Scorpio people that I know, especially ones that had stelliums in Scorpio. They've questioned themselves.
Hmm.
They've questioned
Oh yeah.
themselves. And now I'm assuming Uranus and Sagittarius people. I don't know if theirs is that bad though, because the that Uranus Gemini cycle of Sag and Gemini seem to give us everything in life. If you look at that like that, anyway, where it gives us new ideas. So I don't know if it's like horrible, but maybe they're like, damn, why didn't I think of that? They might be like, I wish I was your age now with what I know now. That might be something. And then the people that do actually have Uranus in Cancer or Gemini when they get their return now, if they're alive, what it looks like for them. If you have Uranus in Gemini, should I say this? If you have it natally, send your chart. We could do like a 5 minute reading on me, or so because I'm like I'm not trying to have every Uranus and Gemini out of the woodworks, but I would love the data to see what you guys are gonna go through and how that's going. Because yeah, like my little Sims. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The opposition is gonna be the halfway mark, so around 42
Hmm.
is when people get that.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, it's right, midlife crisis, right? We associate that with 50, but that's under the assumption that like 100 is what everyone's gonna reach.
Yeah.
But I do think that can already, it's certainly when things can start. And
Hmm.
obviously I cannot speak on that, but it is an age where a lot of people like really start to grapple, like, if you maybe went down a conventional path, I would say, of I don't know, getting married young and having a stable career and having kids and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and all of a sudden you get that Uranus position and you haven't, like, I don't know, explored things, or Uranus hasn't hit you hard in another way. That is like the moment where you're like, oh shit, like maybe I've been living a lie. And now
Yeah.
everything is, I have to
Yeah.
change everything in my life. And then it's like this, it's not just destabilizing you, but it's destabilizing everything
Yeah.
around you, because you're not just impacting yourself, you're impacting your family or whatever. And so, but it is very much that age where a lot of people tend to, maybe go through divorces, or are just like, all of a sudden they're like, I'm gonna go to an ayahuasca retreat because I'm gonna need to
Yeah.
find myself. Like that's kind of that time. Obviously, it depends on previous transits. Like it's not the first time that you're gonna encounter Uranus. Um, so yeah, but I do think if you've had Uranian experiences before, it might equip you better to handle that, I would say. But obviously, I cannot speak from my own experiences yet. But there's equally, it can also just be like in a positive way where you're like, I'm gonna change my career, and actually it leads you to doing something much more fulfilling. You're much more financially free, and it doesn't have to mean that you go and rupture your family life or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but it is kind of, I think, that point. Yeah, especially after that Saturn return, which everyone gets around like 27 till 30, where yeah, you're really grappling with life in a different way.
Yeah, I've thought about that because that 40s really is a midlife crisis, and I used to only look at it through Saturn because after your Saturn return, once you get to like 42, 45, you're like halfway to another Saturn return, and Uranus just so happens at 42 to also hit you. So it's like you got both
Yeah.
of those, and if you're not doing the thing that you should have learned from your Saturn return, you're gonna halt. And depending on how much you got in that car, or if you're going 100 miles an hour or whatever kilometers that is, sorry, you
Okay.
might have to like try to slow down, and you're not going to be able to pump the brakes. It's like you're going to hit a wall or whatever it is, and you're like, or maybe like you're about to drive off a cliff and you got to jump out that moving car, but you're going to do it because you'd rather take that pain and just eat shit than to die. And
Yeah.
that's what that really hits you, and it's like, and so people just up and unplug their lives and they change everything. And it doesn't mean that you have to, like you said, get a divorce or get this and that, but sometimes people are asleep at the wheel and they feel as though destabilizing themselves gives them a justification for the chaos outside of their life. So they just throw it all away. And that's the motivation of like, this is my idea.
Mm,
Because of whatever's happened in my job, I now have to get a divorce, or we have to do this. Not that you weren't suffering or whatever before, but you could have done it before. But this seems easier for you to justify it now, you know? Yeah.
agree. I feel like it's the just go fully bonkers
Yeah.
type of transit. Like, it's already hitting me, so I might as well go like full loco or something with it and
Might as well.
go and shave off my head and
Yeah.
or
Commit
paint
into
it
it.
green or something. I don't know. Which, kudos to you, but I think it's always just harder. And I can say that from like because I used to work as a psychiatry nurse. And there's, I obviously you see people at their crisis moments. You don't see them at their stable moments, which is like
Hmm.
so Uranus in and of itself.
Hmm.
And so you see the people that struggle with the same things that maybe someone is struggling when they were younger, but they're only grappling it at a later age.
Yeah.
It's usually a lot harder because there's so much more things at stake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really depends on what you've did before because it can also, again, like relationship wise, okay, maybe you might get a separation. It might also be that like both of you are like, I'm gonna go find myself on a world journey and then you come back together or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's usually if you've already done a lot of work. But if it's like the first time you're encountering that,
Yeah.
it's usually hard. Uh, but interestingly enough, I think, and that's also what a lot of the are like Uranus and in Aquarius generation is known for, is that we're like hyper aware of everything. Like
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
feel like we already know the therapy talk and everything where it almost destabilizes destabilizes us in a way where we're afraid to even engage because we've seen our
Correct.
parents and our grandparents
Yeah.
go through that and it not really turning
And
out so well.
and live
So
in fear.
I'm like, what's gonna happen to our Uranus opposition when we get it? I feel like it might be so different. Yeah, and Uranus and Leo sounds so foreign as well, thinking about
Yeah.
it.
I wonder if we feel like failures. That's the only thing I could think of, where people start to feel like they miss something, or they're not getting credit for what maybe was the reason why things change or something, like, cuz Uranus and Leo natally is just all about, I'm the reason why. So,
Yeah.
I etched myself. So the opposition's like, well, if I did my part, where's my trophy? I guess you could say. Um, and I've considered that a lot, because when people come to me and they get a reading, and it's, I'm just like, oh, you just had your Uranus opposition, or a quarter turn actually as well. I'm just like, wow, what about this and this? And you see how exacerbated it feels to them in that moment, and that's where the emotion comes into
Yeah.
play, and not for nothing. It does feel like a lot, but life moves on, and you're the spotlight for a moment of time, but lightning does not strike the same place twice. And I promise you, you're not going to get hit again that same way. And let's say you do happen to again, hey, you're kind of lucky. Maybe you got to change that perspective. Like, if it really did happen twice, what is there to gain from that? You can only control your reaction to everything. So your ability to stabilize your emotions in the midst of that is what can make you so much better. You could use it as a fuel to something for your future, or whatever it could be. But I don't think it's always a con. But that's just because I've had this as a life. So, maybe, I've seen the people that had Uranus and Scorpio like crawling, because Uranus and Taurus ripped them a new one, and they were not ready for it, because
Mm,
you know they just weren't ready. But yeah.
yeah. Can you ever be ready for Uranus? I think it's impossible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about medical astrology, which I'm like, it seems so off place, like bringing that up now.
Yeah.
But it is, we talk about like medical astrology in every episode, and I think it just makes sense to bring it here as well. Even though, again, the outers are not personal planets, but they certainly can affect us, especially if they're, again, if it's aspecting your moon, it's gonna do something to your body, or could potentially do something to your body, or if it's aspecting your sun, it could do something with your vitality, or maybe
Hmm.
Uranus is transiting your sixth house, and then of course it's gonna impact your health and
Hmm.
wellness and well-being. And so Uranus in medical astrology is associated with the body's like electric circuit, so to say. So, which is like the consistency and the flow of electrical currents and signals in the body, aka the central nervous system, basically.
Hmm.
And this is also one of the reasons why Uranus transits can emotionally, nervous system wise, feel so destabilizing in and of its well, because it feels like this electric current that is just pulsating to you. And if you don't have any grounding techniques or techniques how you can let that energy out, it can, yeah, it can certainly feel or be a manic episode. Like I don't even want to like glamorize it. Like that is 100% a manic episode, at its worst. And I've seen bad manic episodes in my time working as a psychiatry nurse, and it's not fun at when it's like really out of hand. And yes, it can also be tied to things like seizures and sensory processing disorders. So it's Uranus can really do a lot when it comes to your health. It can really destabilize your health. It can also be something like a health scare, where it's like it really forces you to change your life and revolutionize the way that you take care of yourself and your health and what you do about it. So again, it's this double nature where it can like go this way or that way. But again, just so unpredictable with Uranus once again.
I've thought of this the same way, like people who have Chiron and Taurus or
Hmm.
Capricorn, where it's so somatic for them, where they'll just have like life altering experiences, especially through heavy transits, or they get sick specific times of the year. And in my own personal experience with Uranus in my 10th house, when Pluto, every time Pluto went into Aquarius, like originally, like I could not sleep. And that electricity is so real to the point where I remember I had a tarot reading one time where the lady actually got up and was like, "You have such a static field around you, and you just need
Mm,
to shake it." And I ended up like during that period of time, Jupiter was also in Aries, I believe. So it was like, you know, late 20 teens. And I was like, I was working out twice a day to get the energy out.
oh yeah.
And luckily I never hurt myself, but I just thought so much about how I could have really injured myself because the thing that I noticed it does is it takes you out of body. And that's been something that in my therapy sessions with my astrologer, she's given me grounding activities to do because she's like, when you have aspects to Uranus, to your sun, you disconnect. Like your
Mm,
body and your mind disconnect. And so your body could be very tired, but your mind is on, or vice versa. And so it's not a stable current. It's almost like getting your corpus callosum severed or something. And you just do these things where it's like it doesn't align with how your body might want it to. And it leads to these injuries. And we know that Aquarius like governs your ankles and breathing and all this. So something that I learned was this practice of breathing in through one nose and releasing through
mm,
the other, where I'm going to do it where you go.
yeah.
I try to do it whenever I feel like a lot, but you breathe in 7 seconds through one nose, you breathe in, you breathe out 7 seconds, and you pause for about two or three, exhaling and inhaling. And it does something where it brings you back to your body because it's almost as if, let's say you're grocery shopping with a child and they're just running around, right? And then, but you're the parent and you're in the aisle and you say their name and they turn around. They may not come immediately, but they're going to come back. That's what that seems to do in that same way. It just
Mm,
brings you back to the couplet. And Otherwise, you're gonna have episodes of mania. And I've seen it. In Aquarius stellium people, they'll have it. But during this Uranus transit, I kept telling people don't watch the news. Not because your safety isn't important, not because yes, maybe ICE is in your neighborhood or whatever it is that's like giving you fear, but you can't let it get to your nervous system
Yeah.
because Mercurials embody stuff, and Virgo especially makes autonomic issues with their body. And if your sympathetic nervous system is like on the fritz, then the parasympathetic, if I'm saying this correctly, doesn't get to rest. And
Mm.
the longer you're on, that's just affecting you horribly. And your body, like for people that like weightlift, after a good deadlift session, you can't go the same way again the next day. You could try it, but you're wearing yourself down horribly because your central nervous system needs to rest. So when these transits happen, whether it's Uranus or it's Aquarius season or something squaring your Aquarius energy, you got to take time to relax. I'm saying all this and I feel hypocritical because I did not do a good job at all. I took on way more burdens because I had the energy, but my body eventually, like last year especially, like slowed me down. Where I was doing astrology, I was doing bodybuilding for competition, and then I like hurt myself in two ways, doing the same things I've always done and the
Yeah.
same weight, but my body just could not take 2 sessions of lifting and cardio. Like it just couldn't. And no matter how young I am, that is something that I have to agree. But the Pluto just made me feel like I had to do so much. And it's like that is another thing I would tell all of you for medical astrology wise, be very mindful that even though you have the energy to do it, even though you can, don't. I'd rather you take some ashwagandha or drink some tea, let
Mm.
your body chill versus pushing yourself to that extreme because it's a mental thing most likely. It
Yeah.
manifests physically, but it's always mental with this. So, yeah.
Full on agree. I think a good like uh mythology, is that the right word? Or what I can describe this with is when you put, and again, Uranus has to do with electricity as well. We haven't even talked so much about it, but Uranus has to do with electricity.
Yeah.
And when you put like electricity cord in the thing,
Mhm,
and it's like the voltage is too high because it can't fully flow through, it explodes.
mhm. Yeah.
And that's Uranus transits, or what they can do to your health, where you feel great and you feel amazing. You're like, whoa, I can handle this. But then something shifts and it's too much. And that's usually also what like awakening feels like, and what in yogic traditions, like the reason why you meditate every day actually is to kind of prepare your nervous system. So when that moment, that push comes from like for like an expansion for this Uranian awakening, it doesn't overwhelm your nervous system, because otherwise it can just easily break you. And, the line between, breakdown and breakthrough with Uranus transit is very, very thin. And,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
always like to tell people, be very cautious when you do have Uranus transits, again, hitting your natal planets, that especially have to do with your bodily health. It can easily go from to break down in whatever way. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's fully necessary. Like, right, crisis lends itself to opportunity.
Mhm.
But it's like if you can avoid it, then, it's probably better to avoid it, because it's going to be more pleasant if you actually try to put that energy outside of your body, or just use it in a way where it's like you're using it and it's not using you.
Yeah.
Like, better just stay up that extra night and, I don't know, write songs up until the morning, instead of, I don't know, being cowered in your bed and doom scrolling. Like, you're going to
Mhm.
use that in such a better way. So that's
Mhm.
what I have to say here. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I fully agree with that.
Okay, well then we can talk a bit, and we're kind of going to that last part right now where, how to build a relationship with Uranus, which I have been thinking about this, because I think building relationships to the inner planets very different than building a relationship to the outer planets. And I'm not even sure you can build it in the same way as you do with the inner planets. Like I've never done a Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto altar. I've done plenty of Venus altars
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, and I constantly like sit down and talk to them. I've never sat down and talked to Uranus, because it's an outer planet. It feels more distant. It doesn't feel personal, and they aren't. They aren't personal,
Yeah.
right? They're outer planets. They're interpersonal planets, and so. What I was thinking, I think the outer planets, it's not that we build a relationship with them, but they come into our lives, and it's through the things that come into our lives that I don't know if that we necessarily build a relationship with them, but it makes us aware of their like presence and how they show up. Like, you know what I mean? But personally, I would. Yeah, for Venus, I'm gonna buy flowers. I'm like, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what I would do for Uranus. Uranus just kind of shows up and wreaks havoc in my life. Like, you know what I mean? So, and there aren't also, with the inner planets, there's 7 days there for the seven
Yeah.
planets. You can sit down during that day on the planetary hour. We don't have that for the outer planets, so
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of different.
I've definitely thought that it's about space. Because when you first said this, I was like, I've never thought about that either. But what came to me intuitively immediately was like, it's space. And it's space because you don't know what excess looks like.
Mm,
So let's say you're building an altar for Venus, like you said, and you're putting down flowers. For Uranus, it could actually just simply be removing something from where it used to be and leaving it empty. I don't know why that seems to be the best way to say it. It's not as if like it's Pisces where it's full of something that you're waiting for ethereal, but it's
yeah.
like it's serendipity. I think that for a long period of time where I live right now, I had no art. And during Uranus and Taurus, I have collected art indirectly.
Mm,
And almost I think I paid for one piece of art, but everything else it was either given to me or I was out with friends and we were doing something or it's something astrology related. And I have so much art now. And that same way is a really good Uranus moment because Uranus is squaring my 10th house. Most of my art is related to the things that I find interesting astrologically or in a spiritual way, Scorpio versus Aquarius, and that's it. I don't have art of horses or cars or me. It's always abstract stuff that could be scientific, sci-fi, or whatever. But it's because I had the empty space for it. And
mm,
what's his name? I might have to search him up. But he made the book the art of living. I think it is. Um, he is a Pisces stallion man. Um, and I'm looking to see if maybe I can find him, but maybe I can't. It's a book that's it's a circle with a dot. um,
Oh, Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is a Pisces stellium, and oh yeah, the creative act, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
creative
Totally.
act
I
of
literally have
living.
that book like right there.
Yeah. That's how I remember the book. And when I think about his zodiac, I'm gonna actually pull it up so I can make sure I'm correct because I don't ever remember it correctly. But I know he's a Pisces stellium. Where was his Uranus? Oh, there we go. It's Uranus and Pluto, and his moon, Pluto, and Uranus are all in Virgo. And I remember he made this video where he was talking about his home. It's like white walls and he just has like musical equipment. And at first you're like, this guy's crazy. But it made sense to me because when you sit in open space, it's if you close your eyes, you'd be connecting with Neptune maybe, where it's like if you get on some sort of psychedelic or a drug, you're not fully present here and you could it's
Hmm.
like closing your eyes. But
Yeah.
keeping your eyes open and being present is like your open space. And it doesn't even have to be in your home. I feel like this could be like you do going up to the mountains, going up to nature. It's not about the factor of
Mm.
earth and that's what you're connecting with, but it's more so like the idea of a grounding rod, or like the way that if you sit up straight while you're meditating and you're
Yeah.
transferring this like kundalini like energy from your root to your third eye, the space that you're doing that is going from a higher dimension or going from a lower dimension to a higher dimension, and it creates a channel. And I like to think about this, if I'm doing a tarot reading, the first thing I do is like protecting myself with a white sphere, and it'd be the same thing where the space you make, if you keep it open, you open yourself up to receiving whatever it is could be, right? You could say, well, what about someone that doesn't have any means? They literally have all this space. And I look at that and I'm like, you can look at that as less, but they can also be free because they don't have any
Mm,
obligation. At the most extreme, that is Uranus. Space to a point where you own nothing, right? It's why it could be like why when we were talking about how Neptune and Uranus and Capricorn question everything, it's because they realize that in the fact of everyone having all the money and the cars and the tricked out mansions and all this stuff, there was still empty space. It was almost dead.
yeah.
It didn't really satisfy anything. So they saw that space, but they didn't see it tr- fully. It's probably like they saw capitalism and they're like, this is horrible. But
Mm.
as it goes into Gemini, I feel like that space will be so much of like honoring yourself by not keeping stuff. And that becomes nomadic, where it highlights how Gemini has a whole bunch of things. Like having a Gemini moon means you got a lot of thoughts, but you don't keep them. You don't hold them to be yourself. You could write them down, right? But you
Mm.
don't make them permanent. And in that same way, Uranus and Gemini will show you these opportunities, but you got to have the space for it. um, that would be the only way I could think of actually making a quote unquote altar to it to really embrace that energy, to receive anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I was also thinking before, like on a very practical level, one way to connect with Uranus is go and look at lightning if it's happening when lightning is
Yeah.
striking, like lightning storms. That is very Uranian. Um, but again, I think the interesting thing with the outer planets is that they are so slow moving, and that I think it almost depends on the transit that is happening
Yep.
in your chart, which is usually going to be a once in a life. I mean, probably, yeah. You might get like a double hit from Uranus if you make it to 90 with some things,
Mm-hmm.
but usually, and certainly Neptune, Pluto, there's like things you're going to only experience once in a lifetime. And whatever comes into your life during that time, that is going to kind of be the Uranian experience. Like for me, like it was when that summer 2023 rolled around, and all of a sudden polyamory became such a huge like part of my life and exploration. And that is how I connected it and explored Uranus. Like it kind of just came into my life.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a relationship with Venus where I'm like actively engaging. I
Yeah.
think the outer planets are almost like engaging with us first in that way. So, and I think with Uranus especially, it's like the principle of the unexpected. So it's gonna catch you
Mm-hmm.
off guard. Like even if you try and build a relationship with
Mm-hmm.
Uranus, he's gonna be like, actually, that's not who I am. It's gonna like take off another mask and another mask.
Gotcha.
So I think the outer planets, they're showing up in our lives through experiences, and that's how we get to experience them. Not necessarily through sitting down and being devotional, like maybe with the other planets, but just through surrendering through what they want to show and bring to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
There's that's not Uranus right now, but I have a friend, she has her Aries moon at 0 degrees, and I'm like, the fact
Ooh.
that you're getting Saturn Neptune conjunction on your like
That's a
that's
once in
a
a
once in
lifetime.
a lifetime
You don't
thing.
get
And it's
that.
crazy
Yeah.
that you're getting that, and that's going to be the experience during that moment that you're going to experience, and you're not going to have it again. Not in the same way. Even if you get another Saturn return, it's not going to be
Yeah.
with Neptune there.
Yeah.
And so I think I would say the same thing about Uranus, that it kind of just comes in as an experience in whatever way. And hopefully, we can surrender to it, and then we get to experience Uranus in our lives and what it means.
100%. It's it's beautifully said in that like once in a lifetime.
Hmm.
And if you step out of just Uranus, that's the idea of what Uranus wants for you. which is once in a lifetime opportunity, and that changes the trajectory of you.
Yeah.
We all have those transits. For me, there are like three I'm looking at, but the first one was what I just went through with Pluto squaring my sun at the same time, Saturn squaring my Venus and Mars, opposing my moon, and then Uranus also
Yeah. Yeah.
opposing my Scorpio and my like that's a transit that has changed me completely to be who I am now, which I was not this person even just like 3 years ago. I didn't have this level of maturity, whereas it's forced that. And in 2044, when we step into Pluto and Pisces, Uranus is going to be in Leo. And I feel like it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a do over, but it's a revision of everything you've done when Pluto was in Aquarius. And Uranus is going to give you the opportunity to say, I want to do it better this way. So it's not the end of the world. If you feel like Uranus might wreak havoc from now until then in your life, I do feel like that Pluto um, opposing the Uranus, uh, not necessarily directly, but the energy of that would
Yeah.
really make you sit back and reminisce. And so it just goes back to really taking these transits the moment you get them once in a lifetime
Hmm.
and taking it for all it's worth, even if it makes you cry a lot or gets you divorced or you lose someone or you lose a body part. It's so much easier to say that than experience it, but you know, we are going through a lot of once in a lifetime things for the next 100 years. It's like ever
Agreed.
since COVID, we our generation has been like, oh, first time, first time, and it's like, no, it's serious. It is the first time. So take it in for all it's worth.
I love that. I think with that, we can go to the very last portion before we completely close it off, which is reading the Orphic hymn. There is one for Uranus or Uranos.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also one way you can connect to the planets, by the way, by just reciting the Orphic hymns. Even though again, I would cautionary approach Uranus in your life. But yes, I'm gonna let Liv read that. Are you gonna change your background or are you gonna
Yes, actually,
gonna make it
I'm
Iranian and
gonna change my
spicy?
background and really bring it. Did you know that Uranus is actually gray? Most people don't know that. Um, it's not blue. That was like
Oh,
kind of like a
interesting.
psyop in a way. But I'm gonna take a picture of Uranus and put it as my background so I can use that while I actually do this. Give me 1 second. I do have the actual thing pulled up though. Let me see if I can upload this. Okay, so should I make a whole voice and make it serene? Here's Uranus behind me.
Oh,
Um,
I love that.
okay.
Make it
Children
as
of the corn.
dramatic as you want.
So, to heaven, Uranus, the fumigation from frankincense. Great heathen Uranus, whose mighty frame no respite knows, Father of all, from whom the world arose. Here, bounteous parent, source and end of all, forever whirling round his earthly ball, abode of gods, whose guardian power surrounds thy eternal world with ever during bounds, whose ample bosom and encircling folds the dire necessity of nature holds. Aetheral, earthly, whose all various frame azure and full of forms no power can tame, all seeing heaven, progenitor of time, Chronos, forever blessed, deity sublime. Prometheus on a novel mystic shine, and crown his wishes with a life divine. There is a quote that I would love to say, but I don't remember exactly, but it goes basically a life well lived is one where you leave a mark. It doesn't have to be a mark on anything massive, but you want to end your life without any teeth. because that means you've actually bit away at something to make
Mm.
it worthwhile. If you end your life full of teeth, what have you really tried to taste? What have you really bitten into? And that's the way I like to look at it. Um, Uranus has brought me a whole lot of chaos and randomness, but at the end of the day, I will always choose a lifetime where Uranus actually touches me in this same way. So, thank you so much.
Oh, that was a beautiful end note.
Of course.
I'm not gonna say anything else because I love what you said. I don't even feel like I have anything better to add to this.
Thank you.
Um, I'm gonna let you, I don't know, shout out your socials or whatever you
Okay.
want people to know. And we're also, everything is gonna be linked down below so you can find Liv very easily.
So, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok. That might be pending. And it's all under combustastrology, the podcast, the YouTube, the TikTok. I think I don't have a Y in my name on TikTok because it doesn't let me do the characters. But if you just type combust, like COMBUST, and then astrology, um, that's my name. Fun fact: name myself that because um, some of my earlier friends used to make a joke that I had a combust Mercury because I really would just say whatever without any filter because I didn't give a damn. And that's the way they saw me. So I decided to name that my brand. But yeah, thank you.
Great, that's lovely. Well, I also really want to thank you for being here. That was great. And also it depends on where you're listening this. You're either going to be on Spotify or on YouTube, so head to the other one. Wherever you're coming from, you can find me under Resonance Astrology, also on pretty much all platforms, although I do not have TikTok. But on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, this is where I'm most active. And yeah, this is basically the eighth part of the series, and we're going to talk about Neptune and Pluto next. And maybe I'm gonna also dive into Chiron, but it
Mhm.
really depends. I don't know yet, but I just wanted to let you know that this series is probably gonna expand and there's a lot more that I want to like get to it and some special episodes that I want to make that are more general, like maybe like, just how to build devotional relationships to planets without focusing on one specific planet. So there's lots of store in the coming few months that's gonna happen here. So if you like this, feel free to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram or wherever you see fit. And also share it. If you found this useful, share it with somebody else that might find this useful. And also feel free to shoot us a DM or a mail or something if you have a question around Uranus in your life, or maybe something that's stirred up inside of you and you want to just, I don't know, let out your opinion or whatever. So,
Mhm.
yeah, this is what I have for now. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone who has listened to this podcast so far and showed love and appreciation. And yeah, we're going to talk to each other very soon. Bye, everyone.